Killer Jack C just subscribed.
Welcome to Warcraft Reloaded, a podcast brought to you by Mash Those Buttons, covering World of Warcraft Classic and its community. I'm Bobby, also known as Blazin' Bob. We have no Mel today, unfortunately. She was traveling all week. We got the show started way late because her flight got delayed. She's just really tired. So no Mel this week, but we do have Table Slam. Welcome back to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming. And new to the show, we have Zanks. How you doing, Zanks? Oop, you're muted.
Sorry, I randomly muted myself. I didn't want to interrupt in between. No, this is completely new to me, so it just gives me a chance to play around with some of my equipment.
You're good. Well, Zanks raids with our raid team, and he's made videos in the past on YouTube and stuff, and he's got some good knowledge.
I want to say most of it dates back to just 2004, 2005, 2006.
Oh wow!
I saw a different era of classic community come out of the original classic community versus the 2019 version of it.
It was very
since different. I had a very long break. There's so many differences, and now I'm starting to see the community really play out as we within this fourth phase as endgame approaches entirely.
Yeah, it's very different. I tell people about that all the time. I'm like, back in my day, but yeah. All right. Well, I like to start the show off by thanking our tank patrons in Croxford, Turtle Whale, and Braxton. I would like to mention we stream the show live on twitch.tv/BlazinBob. That's BLAZZINBOB. What else we got here? If you need to find any of our stuff, any of our links, just go to warcraftreloaded.com. If you need to buy a Rested XP guide, it's warcraftreloaded.com/restedxp, or link in the description. And if you need to leave a voicemail, it's 816-866-1066 or speakpipe.com/warcraftreloaded. We're going to start the show off with the comment of the week. Then we have one extremely long voicemail, but we're going to play it. And then we're going to just talk about kind of what we've been doing. And then we're going to hit on a little bit of news. And then we're going to end it out with a why is Season of Discovery not more popular question. And we're going to try to answer that here. And hopefully chat can, give us some answers of what they think while we're on that too. So with that being said, let's get into it. Table, since you are the creator of the comment of the week on this show, do you want to do the honors?
Of course. Our comment of the week comes to us from ShadyCat8898, and it's a banger. ShadyCat says, I think runes are a good argument for Classic Plus having a better talent system. Runes are quick and dirty for adding new skills, but the system is definitely clunky. A Classic Plus should revamp talent trees to recreate this effect while being more established and less obtrusive. The ability to swap out options as necessary is the strength of runes that should be carried on into a more refined talent system.
It's an interesting thing. One of the biggest things that I've found as we've went on is just the runes not only being clunky. I mean, I love the rune system. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love it. I love being able to just kind of swap a little thing out, do something out of the norm, or something, you're having a problem and you problem solve it with a rune. And I think that's really cool, but it is clunky. And then on top of that, if you're making alts and stuff, just the process of getting them is out of this world, a pain in the ass. Oh, it's I understand maybe they should fix it for alts, but even people that are going to just start new in the game and then on top of it, just going to all the places You never want to do that with alts, just like you never want to grind rep on alts. You know, you never want to do all that extra stuff. So I don't know. I do agree that it'd be nice to revamp it a bit, but I don't want the talent trees. I like the talent trees the weird way they are. You know, I don't want like a mop talent tree system. Like that's what I don't want.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh,
So,
no. I was done.
I have an interesting perspective because I was playing Alliance from phase 1 through 3, and literally 2 weeks before phase 4 release, my guild was like, "We're done. We're quitting. We're out." And so I was in a situation where I was like, I need to find a new guild, or I could go play Horde. Because originally, when SOD released, I wanted to play Horde, but everybody that I was in the guild with wanted to play Alliance. So I said, you know what? If I'm looking for a guild, I'm going to be playing Horde the rest of the phase and throughout the rest of SOD. And that gave me a perspective of seeing a character from 1 to 60, having no gold, no resources or anything, and like trying to farm all those runes while leveling. Like, I just happen to know where all the runes are, but like, they are a very massive time commitment. Not to mention, like, if you're like very new and you have like no gear from the previous phase or raiding, doing certain runes are almost like nearly impossible if you're like at that level where you need to grab them.
And then you
So
think
like,
about
I'll take for example the mage rune. There's like a mage rune in thousand I can't say the name. Thousands below barons.
Thousand Needles.
Thousand Needles, yeah, sorry, can't say the name. It required in order to do like frost damage to like this like harpy or even to the cat. So like that situation where you need like another mage that can only cast frost spells or like a shaman casting frost shock. I had to get like really tricky and try to build like a shatter combo, but I couldn't do that at, like 25 or anything or like 28. And I was like, I think it's the chromatic preservation rune, where the one you get like the self healing. I didn't go back to that. Like I originally unlocked it at like 25. I didn't go back to it until like level 50 because like I had nothing within the shatter combo to like kill this NPC. And if there's no players around, then you just sitting there either spending time trying to find another mage in the same area, and everybody at the moment is just playing the game because they're already playing phase 4. So like if you're restarting fresh, yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead. I just have a question I want to ask you when you're done here.
Yeah, so they could have definitely made the rune system like an attunement. Like honestly, if you're gonna do like very unique stuff, which I think is kind of cool, it's very interesting. Like trying to find ways to finish the rune, but like it forced players to know that there are certain runes you're not going to be able to do at the proposed level that is you could sustain it. You're going to have to go up to 60 and then come back and redo all that. So like if you're in a situation where nobody's level and nobody's around to like help you, it's really kind of like clunky. That system could have been done a lot more better just by making attunements because there's so many runes that share other runes with other classes that I'd rather you just have them unlocked by an attunement and you can just buy it or anything like that. And not to mention kind of like give like the previous phase runes, like probably you should have cycled them into like a vendor from phase 1 to phase 2 if you want that experience. This is a seasonal server, so like I don't think that it would hurt.
Let me pose a question though.
Yeah, go ahead.
How much fun would it be if you were able to start a new tune right now and have all phase 1, 2, and 3 runes active, ready at level 1? I would roll 100%. A new tune right now just to experience it. It would be so much fun.
I would 100% agree with that. Like, just maybe make it a few little bit gold, or just like hand off the previous phase runes and hand it off, because the players are not going to know if someone's new to the game or even coming back to it without like knowing these rune systems. Like I met other players out in the world trying to farm runes, but they're only farming the runes that were like recommended in guides for like, here's a DPS rune or here's a heal rune. That whole adventure is completely time consuming, and not to mention like normally that's part of classic, making that devotion and that time into it to obtaining these runes. But like it's not a very friendly like alt game. Like I sacrificed like 4 level 50s to go reroll with no resources or anything to go play Horde. And like right now it's like it's so there's so much to do, and not to mention I'm not playing like on a daily basis, like where I have an expended amount of time. Like I log on for maybe 2 or 3 hours a night, and like just that time consumption, and not to mention trying to find a group. With the way the system is right now, it's not very friendly till they like, hey, you need to go find, you know, this rune in Thousand Needles, and that LFG chat's just like flying by, and you're just like, okay, that's luck then. Like either find somebody or do something like that. But that's enough for my tangent on that. But the second part that you talked about with changing the runes around, I think that's really ideal. It's very nifty. It's like getting you to really think about your class. And a lot of people, for some reason, the classic community perceives their class as one specific spec. Like most warriors I've come across to see themselves as damaged, they don't really take the time to learn the prot or learn how threat works. But it's also part of their class. So like these little nuances with like using runes in certain aspects in certain areas, like I use the mage healing rune occasionally, or I swap out through different runes. Like now mage have a cleanse. Like I just play 3 phases of paladins cleansing, and this whole new idea of cleansing that mages can do to help out priests. That really played a big role with an MC. I was like, oh, I have something I can do, but you lose like hot streak as a mage. So you lose like a very pivotal DPS rune for like a cleanse rune in order to help the raid. So either you sacrifice your parses or your damage in order to go get this cleanse thing just to help with like the mana burn or anything else, just like affecting the raid that could kill people.
And that's only
So
a
like it
horde
gets you
problem
really thinking.
because you have
Yeah, it
paladins
is.
and priests in Alliance side.
It was not an issue when I was playing Alliance. I can tell you that. Like it just wasn't something you thought about. Like I thought about it as soon as I started playing Horde. It was like, oh, okay, so you just can't ignore this with certain mechanics.
Mhm.
But I do like the idea of carrying on the system into a future version of Classic, rather than B plus, which I'm assuming this probably is going to turn into later on, but I don't know when. But having that utility is really nice, and having the utility of like dual spec to test things out is very, very nice. So like I
I
can't see
love dual
myself
spec.
like, yeah, it just allows you to play the class more optimally. But like I think of my class as all 3 specs, not just primarily there's 1 spec and 1 role. That's just my point of view though. But to people that are doing something like that, they're not going to perceive it that sort of way. And I've noticed that there's kind of a knowledge gap with that issue, let alone. So like
But you talked
going back
about
to my hard
warriors specifically. Like, I think a lot of warriors don't learn how to tank because, first off, warrior tanking is hard. Like, it's
Oh,
not.
it is.
I've tanked on a bunch of different classes, and warrior tank is freaking hard. Like, and you know, so like, I think people just don't want to do it because it's intimidating.
Oh, it is indeed. Not to mention players are just like harping at you if they have the world boss on, or if you're not moving as fast as they want you to go.
Yep.
You know, you got to be cognitively aware of like every single model that's flying around. And then there are certain players that just don't want to wait, and they'll just start aggroing more packs or more ads, and you're just like playing hopscotch with like all the ads and being like
Puts
trying
you
to get things under
behind. You don't
control.
have rage. Yada yada.
Yeah, and
a
then
lot of
back
this is like it's mindset stuff, right? Like you're talking about using like the class's entire kit or whatever. And like it was definitely way more of a thing to use more of your class's kit in older iterations of WoW. And then as the game progressed through the expansions, it became a lot more specialized, where like you had a lot more people doing hybrid type of stuff in older versions of the game, whereas later on you didn't need to do hybrid stuff because this more specialized versions of different specs had the tools necessary to handle the stuff on their own without needing people to do hybrid stuff. So like some of it's mindset stuff where like we're playing this, the base game of SOD is vanilla, where the game was basically designed around the existence of hybrids and people doing hybrid stuff. So it's like it's people coming into this older version of the game with a more recent mindset. And that I think those are the players that are not necessarily having trouble with it, but like aren't understanding as quickly that the game is built for that. It's not built for this specialized version of the game that we've been playing recently.
Yeah, so like the community in Classic that I've come to realize from a private server and meeting people from private servers have the meta figured out. Like this is the meta. They've known it for like 20 years worth of knowledge. And now you just throw a wrench.
Hold on. Save that for the last conversation.
All right, I'll say that for last.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, just to get back on the main topic of the question, I would love to see that system refined. And I'd like to have the flexibility to change runes at whim. I don't think I could go with losing that option moving forward in like Classic, unless they like balance out the classes, not like fully homogenized where everything does everything, but to a point where like it's fun to play the class and you have a good rotation versus like I know Warlocks back then were just spamming Shadowbolt. I don't want to be in that situation where you're just spamming one spell.
Well, and I don't even like Like I hated mutilate spec in Wrath. Absolutely hated it. I liked combat. I played combat the whole time. I was the armor pen bot for most of Wrath, but took pride in it. Did it well. I had 99% uptime. Because anytime somebody else did it, they just didn't, and I was just like, ugh. It's like when you're a warrior and the other warrior is supposed to be doing battle shout, and you're like, bro, it was off for like literally like 20 seconds. What are you doing? And it's just but like the rogue mutilate feels so fun right now because you're keeping up a bleed. You're using knife throw to or poison, whatever it's called, poison blade or the knife throw thing to like restore energy and like get that last combo point for a full 5-point eviscerate, and keep slice and dice up, and it's really fun. And then you're vanishing to get a damage boost mid fight, or you're switching to shadow step for certain fights because you're getting knocked back by Gar constantly, so shadow step's freaking awesome there. It's really neat to switch out the runes for different things. And, even though I'm not smart enough to think of it right away, we have Simonize, which has helped, rogues inside a lot, whereas other classes don't have a Simonize. So, I don't know. I'm loving it.
Players should definitely be experimenting with their classes. We're in Discovery. The title of the season is Discovery. Like, figure things out. Like, it's not going to, like, I don't know, maybe I have too much of a harp on this, but like, you don't need to follow everybody's like preferred like play style. You can go figure out what you like and what you don't like, and that information is going to be critical for Classic Plus in the future.
Oh hell yeah! And one of the funnest
help resolve. This is going to help resolve like the refinement of the classes right now. If they have this information right now, because I noticed that a lot of people don't really necessarily agree with me, or multiple, or two people do agree. I don't know what the majority consensus is, but I do know there is a sort of reaction that's kind of going on to the fact that the meta has changed completely. Yeah. And now it's just like altered everything.
My PvP spec for Rogue and for Melee Hunter was so wildly different from what anybody else I had found was using. And they're freaking like, they're OP. Like the Hunter one was way more OP, but like no Hunter I did never run into one that was using it. And I'm just like, dude, don't even understand how powerful this is. And it was a hybrid, type of deal. And it's crazy that people don't, just like try to figure out, like, I don't try to figure out PvE stuff. I go to like, unless I have to, I go to, see what somebody else does and then see how I can work that into mine. But I definitely experiment with PvP because, if they know exactly what you are, like they're going to, it's, that's figured out. But if I'm some weird spec where they're like, what the hell? It's awesome, So I don't know.
You're just throwing in like, because the mindset of a meta is to have a staple idea of how a class should play. But if you're playing something that's like outside the normality, that catches people off guard so much in PvP. Because they're just going to assume you have this.
Yep. They see me with a two-hander and they're like, oh, ranged. And then they get close and then I freaking whop them for, a third of their health with one hit, not even a crit. And they're like, what? And I
stun them by shooting them a couple of times.
Oh yeah, I did. Dude did it all the time, a ton in phase 3. I haven't gotten to really play with it much in phase 4 here, but the rogue was a completely different, like all the rogues just seem to be running around in Venom spec, which you could make work with, different runes, like, but it still wasn't, I don't think as nearly as good as like my sub mostly spec. Like, so I don't know.
I think when it comes to like, so like to kind of circle back to the comment, like the Shady Cat's talking about having like a better talent system that could incorporate the runes. And I think a pretty good parallel would be like the way that glyphs work in Kata, where once you get a glyph and you learn the glyph and you just always know the glyph. Whereas like the Wrath glyph system, you had to physically have a glyph in your bag and then apply it every time you wanted to swap stuff out. Whereas in Kata, once you know a glyph, you just know it forever, and then you just use a reagent to swap out glyphs and stuff. And like that's kind of how runes work ish, except for without the reagent cost. And the one of the reasons why the glyphs feel clunky is just the way that the user interface is for glyphs. There are add-ons that make it easier, like there's the add-on Engraver that makes it a lot easier. Like normally when you swap out a glyph, it like a little thing pops up to ask you like, are you sure you want to swap out or whatever? Whereas like Engraver, you literally just hover over the slot and click the rune you want to engrave, and then it just does it without you having to do anything else. So like, you know, just another add another thing to the list where add-ons do it better than the base UI. But if they found a way to make it more streamlined and easier to handle in like a Classic Plus, I think that'd be really good for runes. I don't know necessarily that we would need to alter the talent system from what the baseline is in vanilla that we already see. But if they had like a similar, like right now, there's the rune pane attached to the character sheet. Like that's essentially what the what glyphs are in Wrath and Kata, except for instead of being attached to your character screen, it's attached to your talent screen. There's like another tab on your talent screen. So like, you know, maybe just move it over and make it more like glyphs in Kata, you know, something like that. Like that would make it a little more streamlined, a little less clunky. And if there was like some sort of, I mean, an add-on will still be able to do it better no matter what Blizzard decides to do. People will figure out a way to make it easier with an add-on.
I have a question for you, Table. With the concept of the question, would we want that where we have to be carrying reagents around in order to like change the glyph, or we
No,
would really rather keep the system the way it is?
I think it's fine how it is.
Runegraver or an add-on into the base UI. Wouldn't that make more sense? Yeah.
If the base UI worked more like how the Engraver add-on works, I think it'd be a lot less clunky. Or if there was a way to have like loadouts or something like that, you know what I mean? Like if you have like a preset loadout of runes that you want to run for specific things.
I would love that where I click one button and it changes all of my...
pretty much almost exactly how dual spec is, where like you have your talent set up and you just switch to that. If there was like rune loadouts that you could swap to instead of having to individually change each rune in turn, I think that'd be a lot easier. Like if you're, say you go back and forth between tanking and DPSing, and you can do it in the same talent spec, but you just swap your runes out or whatever, having to swap, 6 runes every time you need to switch roles is kind of a pain. Whereas if you had like some sort of loadout you could swap to similar to the way that dual spec is for talents, I think that would make things a lot less clunky. And just generally just the UI of it being a little improved. I think part of the reason why it feels as clunky as it does is because of the way that the infrastructure is on Era. Like they had to add stuff to the game so that it wouldn't break Era. So the state that things are right now, I don't think that's a candidate for how they would want to actually do it in a Classic Plus. Because if they did an actual Classic Plus, it'd probably be a separate client. At least I would imagine it would be a separate client, or at least they would figure something out so that it could have like a separate stuff, so that if they want to make changes to Classic Plus, they wouldn't have to, wouldn't affect anything else. You know what I mean?
So to play devil's advocate on this, because I've come across the Classic players that have the mindset of keeping Classic as purely as possible. This would be like a massive quality of life, basically, in a sense, to have like these pages, because I played Dragonfight, and when you're changing specs and talents, you basically have those pre-built like pages you can just swap to. I would like to see that in Classic Plus. That's just my opinion, and I think Bob's the same way too, and probably you, Table, are the same way. But I definitely know there's more Classic purists that would kind of like look at this with being like, no, you don't have the friction. Like, why do you freely get to change your spec and talents when it comes to like swapping boss to boss?
I like
to me, I see this as like my point of view is I see it as a hindrance, just because the friction exists. It doesn't serve me anything.
I guess the question would really be like, what purpose does the friction serve? Like, does it serve to improve the overall feel of the game, or is it literally just like a, I don't want to say useless, but like pointless, senseless sort of thing? Like just just a speed bump for the sake of it? Like that's the question that I would rather ask. Like, is there an actual point to some of this friction? And if the answer is no, then it's like, well, what's stopping you from just getting rid of it? You know what I mean?
This friction existed with dual spec. It was the same thing I constantly came across multiple times. And I'm so glad that they added it.
See, I'd kind of like triple spec, but no more than that. Like, honestly, like I like being able to switch runes on the fly out in the field. Like, but then I do like, you have to kind of choose your play style. The only thing I don't like is just not being able to have a PvP spec right now. Like, I have to like
getting caught out in the open world in PvE spec. You're just like, okay, I'll die. Like,
I've been making the backstab spec work in open world, which is good because it's great for what's it called? But I change up a little bit, in the open world, like I have waylay on and stuff like that. Like, so I changed it up a little bit, but I'm still able to like kill a lot of people with it. But I would much rather have a sub spec when I'm like running around the world, but I don't really have that option right now because I'm doing so many dungeons and I don't want to do in Venom in dungeons because it's freaking ass, because like the fights are so quick. So
yeah, there's just like a big difference between the raid and the dungeon specs. Like, if this was anything like retail, you would just have like pages of different specs and builds.
Well, like, and I would like to have I would love to be able to save pre-built ones so that if I go back to the trader and I drop talents, I could just say, put it in. Like I used to have an add-on for that in Wrath. I forget what it was called, but I had all my specs saved. So I would just have it. Talented. Yep. And it would just, change it. But I wish that was just in the game because talented was pretty clunky and not like the best.
You had to like wait a few seconds for it to like actually set your talents in.
Yep. And I wanted to save my bars too. When I changed my profile thing, I wanted to change the bars instead of me having to move shit around, like every time I change specs. I just want to have all that shit saved so I can take the time to do it. But I don't want to have it to where I could just change in the world anywhere to any spec that I want. Like, I'm not a big fan of that.
I would agree with that. Like, we need a pretty healthy balance of like what you can and cannot do. If you just have respect for everything, it'd just be like just too much for just maybe the everyday player.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the 1% type of player, you're like parsing and min-maxing everything, you'd probably have like 10 or 20 different builds, depending on your class and what you're playing.
And I wouldn't want people. That's the whole thing. Like, that's the whole protecting the player from themselves type of deal. Like there would be guilds expecting you to have all of these things, and just change constantly. Like, that's what I hear was a big problem in MOP. You could take a reagent that would allow you to respec anywhere, and then people were respecing every fight. From what I hear, I wasn't there, but
yeah, I have a friend that rated heroic in MOP, and he was just like buying these like crazy, but he was a masochist for this abuse. He just loved it for some reason. I could never get it. I just did LFR at the time. Like, I wasn't really playing retail very seriously, but he was just kind of telling me what was going on because I had quit WoW like with the second tier of content of like Kata, like back in 2014, and then I just stopped like playing seriously from that point.
Same. Yep. Same. Well, thank you for the comment. We should definitely move on though, because we got still a few more things to hit. Let's go ahead and play these voicemails. There quite a bit of them here. Yeah, I swear I had this up already, but I guess I did not. Sorry about this, guys. Just take me a second here. We'll have these up. All right, here is the first one.
Part 1. Hey, Bob and Mel. This is Narg. I just listened to your pre-bis grind episode with regard to SOD. I don't play SOD. I currently am kind of on a hiatus from WoW. And I guess I've been wanting to leave a message about kind of this philosophical idea of like WoW and maybe the future of it. And how to get kind of casual players like myself. Casual being in the sense of I really like working for gear and progression, but I'm someone who can't dedicate my time and my weekly schedule to raiding. So raiding is basically inaccessible. So that's why I consider myself kind of a casual player, because raiding is basically like the pinnacle of kind of the gameplay is inaccessible to me. Not through like a flaw of the game or anything, just doesn't work out for me. And I feel like it would be harmful to the player base if I like signed up and I wasn't ready. So I'm kind of looking at how to bring casual players back. And I've kind of been thinking about this over the last like several months, listening to your program and kind of thinking of different ideas. And it kind of clicked just kind of with your last episode and the guests you had. So I'll continue this in another message.
Message 2.
Part 2. So kind of the pinnacle of WoW for me is kind of the dungeon, playing dungeons. I love dungeon grouping, and I love getting through those 5-man dungeons. It's super intimate for me. I can really get into my class and the role of the group, and it's absolutely like I think that's like my favorite type of gameplay, honestly. And I guess I'm just kind of saying that, you know how your guests, one of them was saying how they absolutely loved the tier 0.5 quest line. And I kind of was like, hey, you know, what if Blizzard every phase, I'm talking about phases when you're at max level. I played classic, you know, at launch and everything. What if whenever they were like, okay, we're doing a new phase, we're doing a BWL now, or we're doing AQ. What if they added in a new slew of dungeons? Maybe they have like 2 or 3 that are strictly related to that new raid that comes out, but then maybe they also go to other parts of the world. Hey, maybe Ungro, I don't know, maybe Wetlands. There's that one place, now I forget the name of it, Aldum, stuff like that. What if they just crack open stuff like that, and they're like, hey, there's a dungeon set in these new dungeons. We'll call them, hey, this is now dungeon set 2 or 1.
Part 3.
Part 3. Yeah, whatever they want to call them. And they're like, hey, you get this dungeon set, and then we're going to have a new quest line, brand new thing. You can upgrade it at your leisure and have fun with that. I think that, like, I had this problem with Classic. I had to quit mid TBC. I had this problem where it was like, I see phased content. I usually I kind of hated phased content, but now I'm like, well, it's actually kind of part of the game, and it actually should be kind of phased. But I was like, everyone, like the majority of the player base, it feels like, is like this big locust swarm, and they gobble through the content. They just eat it up super quick. And if you're in that, if you're at that cutting edge, I bet it feels great. But I was always outside of that. And so I always felt like I was behind every step of the way. And I think opening up like, hey, this outside of rating, the stuff that you don't need to search through, you can kind of do it at your own pace. You're still involved with people. You're still being social. It's an MMO. You're still doing all that. You're grouping up. Having like an upgradable piece of gear that you get outside of rating, I think that I would come back in an instant. If every phase you had something like that and new dungeons, I would be back in a heartbeat. So I think that's the solution, at least for me. I can't speak for everybody. So I guess like...
And last one.
Part 4. Yeah, I didn't mean to make 4 parts here, but here we go. So yeah, that's kind of my solution, I think, at least from my perspective, how I would get kind of tethered back in to being a consistent player. And because I mean, when I quit mid TBC, I still had the WoW itch, and I'll be honest, I know we weren't talking about it early on in your podcast, but I got into Turtle WoW. I started in 2022. And it took me about a year to level up a mage to 60 and to do the whole tier 0.5 quest line. And I know that's probably crazy long and people probably scoff at that, but it took me a year and I did it at my own pace and it was fun and I really got a lot out of it. And yeah, I just love that they're taking a chance with this sod. And I feel like going back to a classic version of 2019 era, the game kind of feels unfinished. And I feel like that's kind of like Turtle Wow is like a classic plus, and I feel like probably sod is kind of like similar to that. And having kind of a classic plus experience shows me that there's so much more lateral movement that they can make with this game. So I don't know. I think that, yeah, I guess I just want to know, my question is, what do you think of that? Those points I brought up. Do you think that would help the casual player base kind of still be involved with the game? Because I do. But yeah, love the show. Talk to you later.
So my first thought on this is, if they did release a new quest line and stuff and everything, like for, each tier of content, and it was just a little bit better than the raid tier prior, it would also, not just for the casuals, but for the like hardcore raiders, it would create a whole nother pre-bis charge, which everybody seems to love. I mean, I could see there be merit to this idea. Instead of just running dungeons over and over again to, get, some sort of currency to buy last tier gear, I don't know.
I feel like that can be dangerous, because one of the things that people didn't like about later versions of the game was that when a new tier of content came out, it basically invalidated the previous tier of content.
Oh, I meant just barely or whatever, but
you got people that are willing to pay a lot of gold for, Juju Might instead of just using Firewater. You know what I mean? Like, if there's a two stat difference, people are going to do it because it's better. You know what I mean? Like, if it's a little better than tier 1, people are going to stop running Molten Core because they can just do dungeons to get gear that's better than Molten Core gear. I know that it's,
Is that a bad thing, though? Do we really want to go into the situation from 2019 where we're still running Molten Core when we're in Nax?
Well, the thing with the WoW community is it just has so many different types of community of players. But it seems like the loud voice within the classic community is the diehard, like, maxers that will just eat up content, like the guy you mentioned, within like the first week. Like, I completely empathize with him on that, because I play the game very casually in comparison to how diehard I used to play it in the past. Because now it's just like people go through 4 months worth of content in like a week, and that seems to be a thing that just now exists in comparison. When I think back of like classic vanilla, people had like the idea or maybe the exploration to go do a dungeon or to do really anything in the game, whether it be a raid or a dungeon or a quest in. There was more openness to do that, but now the consensus is and max get the best gear and going back to table like you had mentioned. I can understand that, because now if you start adding in these other systems, then you're adding into another system for the min maxers are going to now like chase after this and then chase after that too. When you start invalidating other systems, and like, we're not going to find out until BWL releases if we'll be going back to MC. I don't mind it, I guess, from the classic point of view of going back and killing Ragnaros, because when I played it in 2019 version, going back and doing the old raids that you've already bypassed with the tier content really didn't bother me, and you had something to do and maybe had an item to go for. But I guess it depends from player to player, because the way the players are right now is they eat up content so quickly that if you're a casual player, you just get kind of like left alone. And
well, what if the 0.5 quest just continued, and now you can upgrade your 0.5 and it's as good as tier 1, like, but it has different, it has different stuff, and then maybe it's not as tough each time around, but if you did all the work to get that done earlier, then you've got it. And then the casuals that just cannot commit to a raid, because they just can't, then maybe they'd have something to do that wasn't, in the game, and then they'd still be viable in PvP out in the world. Like, they'd still be able to enjoy all the other aspects of the game besides endgame raiding.
This I see as being kind of like a big controversial thing between the type of players that are within the classic community. I don't mind these systems having a way to like you mentioned, Bob, with the point 0.5 and just extend it so it upgrades and it becomes something relevant to the previous tier content for these players. I mean, with the LFG tool right now, you have to get the add-on and sit there and like Hawkeye the LFG chat and find something supposedly at your own time, your own discretion, and you don't know if you're gonna have that time or whatever. But I guess then it goes back to the friction. Do we want the players that are casual to have something to do and be able to compete with the players that are min-maxing that are investing so much time to get where they are? Or do we find that such a sustainable taste within the classic sort of state of the game? Do we like it that players are min-maxing and getting to a certain point? Or do we want to go into sort of retail kind of ish mindset of giving players a means to catch up?
Well,
I don't know. I've seen different opinions on this.
in the 0.5 thing, like it would still be, it's not I don't think it's the same as like a looking for raid and, giving out stuff like that. It's still a lot of stuff done in game. It's just stuff done at their own pace. And the casuals would be way behind, any of the min maxers too. Anyhow, it would just be something they could accomplish and they could do because, if they're never going to be able to raid, the best they're ever going to be able to do is the 0.5 quest line. And then, by the time we're in AQ gear, like they just can't even walk around in the world because they get just blown up, at least on PvP servers. They can't get into groups with their gear score, yada, yada.
Yeah, I would probably agree to have a system, something like that for the casuals to like have something to do outside of raiding.
I think it's better than looking for raid.
Raiding. Yeah. I don't want to look
stuff like
for
that in like the modern game too. Like Mythic Plus exists, and that's like a separate progression system. You know what I mean? Like, and people who are doing like Mythic raids and stuff like that, like they don't really.
So
like, there's a maximum eye level that you can get from Mythic Plus anyway. So it's like if the level of raids that you're doing are going to give you gear that's better than what you can get out of Mythic Plus, like the only reason to do Mythic Plus is because you want to. You know what I mean?
So we have a recent example of that with like the alpha dungeons, the beta, and the gamma Wrath Classic, I believe.
Yep.
The one thing I came across is like a fresh character hitting 80 in Wrath Classic content and trying to do those dungeons. Players were just naturally gatekeeping. I wouldn't say really gatekeeping. They just would rather have people geared just to fly through these dungeons. I guess you have to make it friendly to where like it's not so much of a punishment in taking someone that's very undergeared or can't output the same DPS as somebody that's like daily rated on a daily basis.
I think with the gatekeeping is definitely like for people that are making pre-made groups and then queue with the pre-made group, and then like queuing solo with randos can be a crapshoot. So it's like it can't be so hard that you can't pug it with randos, but if it is, then it's like you're not going to be able to get into a pre-made group to do it because you're in the position where you need the gear. You're the one that they should be taking, but everybody who's making the groups for it just wants to get it out of the way because they want to get their daily done fast. You know what I mean? Like
daily or like one base item that just still miraculously exists. I mean, that was something I was come across on the Wrath client when I had a fresh character, and I was like, I don't really know anybody, but I thought this was a great idea at the time to like get people to catch up. But player immersion and player behavior was something that that was the only barrier that I came across. But then there are some people that are very open minded, like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, we'll take you. It's not a big deal. Just do the mechanics.
Yeah, because you don't need everybody to be fucking crazy geared to be able to do the stuff. Like the stuff is designed to do with the level of gear that you have when you need the drops.
It's weird for me because I would run them all the time with my warrior tank, and I never gate kept, but maybe I'm the weird one. Like I do gatekeep for pugging raids just because, sorry, like I've had too many bad experiences of people that just walk in there not knowing jack shit. So I'm going to check your logs and make sure you've done it before, and, or at least make sure you did the previous raid tier before, and if you don't have logs, I'm going to ask questions, and that's just, and it doesn't have to be like you have awesome logs. It just has to be you have competent logs. I don't know.
So this comes back to the parse culture. I always had a thing where if you're parsing between blue and purple, I don't see an issue.
Yep.
It just shows that they're competent to be able to do mechanics. Like, and some people take the parsing stuff way too serious,
Yep.
and that just alienates the people that are doing like blues or purples. They can improve over time. I've always looked at like you could always improve on a daily, weekly basis on rating. Just have to communicate, or maybe just find out new things.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
the
it's
parsing's
really
weird. It's like-
rewarding when you help somebody and they become better.
Yeah,
the way I
really
see the
rewarding.
parsing thing is like you look at somebody that you know you're expecting somebody to have purple parses for a pug or something like that. It's like the way that I see it is like the type of people who they don't need a Lambo to drive 2 minutes down the road to work. A Camry, a 98 Camry will do just fine, but they're asking for a Lambo to do it. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you like? Be realistic. Come on.
that for some reason seems they'd rather have the Lambo. They'd rather waste like that extra 30 minutes, find somebody geared versus like the other 3 or 5 other people that are just like slightly under geared. I don't understand it, but I mean, I get it if you have some trauma with taking really bad players. I get that part, but also like I think I can't help but harp back onto the 2014 community that I remember was very more open minded about taking players on the gear or just teaching people or like willing to help people learn the game
Yeah.
versus the community that it is now.
I take green parsers. Like I just need to see that, you're not dying every fight. You're not, a 13 parse every fight. You know what I mean? Like that's what I need to see. So
Yeah,
it's
that
not
is-
truly gatekeeping. It's just being a smart raid leader and not screwing over the rest of the people in your group, and that's just what it comes down to for me. But for 5-man groups, I take anybody. Like I still to right now take like level 58s to Ubers or level 57 to Skolo when it's really not that smart, but I don't care. Like we're gonna be fine, like
it's not a big deal. These dungeons are very, very easy.
yeah. And then you
Very
can
well
say
done.
grats when they ding you. Yeah, I mean it's great. Like
I think to kind of like address some of the stuff that this person was saying in their the voicemail, like the having stuff to do for players who can't, for whatever reason, do raids or whatever, like still having stuff for them to do is cool. You know what I mean? Like the dungeons are fun. Like I have a lot of fun in dungeons too. Like I enjoy tanking in dungeons way more than I do.
what do you
tanking
enjoy
raids.
the most? Because I know
What
what
do you
you enjoy the most in dungeons.
Spamming swipe. I mean,
No, you know the answer. Don't try to front. I'm just
What,
going to check it and
tanking?
see if this evade spot works, Bob. Bob,
Oh,
I
yeah,
really want
okay.
to check to see if this other evade spot works, Bob.
caught.
I mean, literally
Totally
every
caught.
dungeon we've ever done together, you're like, Bob, can I just
100%
check this evade spot?
Yeah, be right back. I'll be just 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, like-
I've seen that from a couple of your dungeons so far. That's too.
But like there's definitely something to be said for like the dungeons is just a separate type of content than raids. You know what I mean? Like it's the stuff that works in dungeons doesn't always work in raids, and the same vice versa. So it's like it's a whole separate thing. So like it would be kind of cool if Blizz would like lean into that a little bit, and just have like end game dungeon content be a thing, even if it's as simple as like how people like how they did heroic dungeons in TBC and beyond. You know what I mean? Like there's your regular version of the dungeon, and then later on, if you want more of a challenge, you can set it to heroic and then do the heroic version of the dungeon. Like something similar to that. Like the Undermine Real system that we have going on is basically just badges of justice. You know what I mean? Like
It would be better filler to have like a heroic version of version 2.
I like
Yeah.
timed
Challenge.
stuff better. Like I like hitting time marks. I think that would be a lot more fun.
There's a whole bunch of stuff
than
that
a
they
bunch of
could
new
do.
mechanics and shit. Like because the
yeah.
Gamma stuff, like it's funny because like it kind of just was like annoying stuff, right? And then no, not Gamma. The very last one came in, and then it just you would get these buffs that would negate the annoying stuff. Like it was so weird and bizarre. They were actually easier than the phase before.
Like Halls of Lightning and Halls of Stone.
Yeah, you'd get like the different buffs and stuff. So it really wasn't harder. It was actually just easier.
Yeah, Halls of Lightning was my favorite gamma to tank whenever I had to tank it, is because you were encouraged to basically speed run it, so you didn't drop your buff, you didn't drop your stat, and like there was like a different strat and a different pathing that you would take. Like a good example is like the Forge boss, the Forge guy. Like you would drag as a tank, you would drag him over to the doors, so that as soon as he died, you would immediately go aggro the next pack so that you wouldn't drop your stacks, and you could carry your original stack that you started 2 feet into the dungeon. You could carry that all the way through to the last boss if you played it right.
Mm-hmm.
And the mindset of what chain pulling is like if you're really good as a tank.
Yeah, so like that, it just mixed it up, because like a dungeon that you might chain pull just because you want to get it done fast. Now you're like actively encouraged to do it.
Yep.
Which was fun. So like that's just a whole like, and there wasn't anything like that in any of the raids. You know what I mean? Like that type of content, that specific way of playing the game, it was exclusive to dungeons and like that specific dungeon. But like that's not a set of content that you would ever get in a raid. So like similar thing, like not that exact mechanic. I'm not saying to add that into a classic plus sort of situation, or even just a SOD sort of situation, but like something that would just make dungeons feel like they matter at endgame. Because like at a certain point, like once enough raid tiers are out, nobody's going to be doing, like nobody who is a raider is going to have any reason to do dungeons. You know what I mean? If we've already seen that with phase 2 and phase 3.
It's really just the alt. If you have the drive with an alt, maybe, yeah.
Dude, I hate
but other than that,
oh, sorry.
But like there's other, like Blizzard has been really good in the past about taking good ideas from other games and implementing them into WoW, like putting that Blizzard polish on it. And the first game that pops into my head when it comes to like keeping dungeons relevant and stuff like that would be like Final Fantasy 14, where at max level you have like your sort of dailies that you do to get your whatever, you know, your end game currency and stuff like that. Kind of like how the daily heroic is in modern. And it would it would have every single dungeon in the game would be available to be queued into with this system, and it would automatically scale all the players to whatever level that dungeon was. So even if you're max level, if it puts you in the first dungeon that you could ever run, it scales you down so that you don't have your full kit anymore. You have the kit that you would have had at the time, and it allows you to get queued in with like fresh players, completely fresh players who are doing it for the first time. And you get like bonuses and stuff if you end up running a dungeon with somebody who's never done it before. Like if you're with a first timer in that dungeon, everybody else in the party gets a bonus because you ran it with the first timer. So it's like these little things that like keep the older content relevant for in-game players, and also inadvertently, they're not doing it on purpose, but they're helping new players at the same time. So like a similar thing to that would be kind of nice to help out some of the more casual players, because you can't really gatekeep with that. It's a random queue. Obviously, like an automatic queued system in any sort of vanilla adjacent thing is not really in line with what they probably want to be doing with vanilla. But like that base idea of like having some way to keep things relevant so that endgame players still want to do the stuff, and it helps out the casual players, it helps out newer players who are still gearing up and stuff like that. Like have everything in the sort of same pool of players would be an interesting idea to help keep things sort of relevant for everybody.
Interesting. Well, I hate to derail this, but I just have to give this out. Hammer Dance and Shaka Zula are doing a Molten Core Pug right now, and both bindings just dropped, and the Warrior tank got them. Wow.
You got both of them? That's
Heat
hilarious.
one. Yeah, I wish Shaka would have got him. Oh, jeez,
play the lottery.
Yeah, my goodness. But okay.
Very lucky.
Well, thank you for your voice, man. We got to move on so we can get through the rest of this stuff. But what you guys been up to? Maybe I should start with just because we all were in we all were in the same raid here for Molten Core, so we decided to go in Heat 2. Everybody had 96 fire res. At least I hope everybody had 96 fire res unbuffed. I didn't check, but
Well, nobody died from not
people were
having
dying.
it, so.
Yeah, so they were either using flask or, counting on possibly, non-tanks might have been counting on a mark. But either way, it started out. It was a shit show. Our Mel, she was out of town, and her heal bot wasn't showing anything. Was it showing who she needed to dispel? Was it showing people's health? She couldn't see anybody's health on her raid frames. She had all kinds of problems. She was grabbing a little bit of resilience on the way and didn't know there was a 30 gold thing, and she didn't have 30 gold. And I mean, it was hell. And then on top of that, we were having issues. We don't know what it was with, we had a mage healer, but it was like, I don't know if it wasn't properly marking who they were healing and everything. It was horrible. We were basically 2 healing, all of it. And our Shadow Priest also had the weird frame problem where he couldn't see who to dispel. So dispelling magic was a huge pain in the ass. But we did just blow through the first 3 bosses. Then we got to Gar. We decided to reboon and stay booned. And Gar just beat the shit out of us for a little bit. And we know a better strategy next week. The mechanics changed from Heat 1 to Heat 2. But we did end up just turning it back to Heat 1 for Gar and Baron. And then we turned it back to Heat 2 for Shazrath. Is that the arcane guy? We ended up turning it back up for that. But then we got to
Shaz was the arcane guy, yeah.
Yeah, then we got to the dude with the 4 healers. And we did one-shot it, but we lost about half the raid and half the world buffs, and everybody time-wise, because we started like 40 minutes late because all of Mel's problems, and it was already time was getting late, so we ended up just going back to Heat 1 for the last 3 bosses, and it wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. I mean, it's just weird that Gar and Baron seem to be the hardest fights in the Psalm version of MC. I don't know if it's because they dropped the bindings. They didn't want people just coming on binding runs super easy later on in the game. I don't know, but it is weird that those seem to be the hardest fights. What'd you guys think of the raid?
I mean, it was my first time in there inside, first time seeing some of the Psalm mechanics. So like, I still remembered the base mechanics from 2019 Classic, but like seeing some of the new stuff was kind of cool. So it didn't really bother me that we were kind of having a little bit of a tough time, because it was still new enough to me that I was like still experiencing it for the first time with some of these new mechanics and stuff like that. So I didn't really mind. Plus, we were just hanging out with the boys, we had some struggles that we had to work through. And it was like, I feel like even though we had a bit of a tough time, it was like pretty good team building.
I mean, we did pretty good. I mean, I think, aside from Gar and Baron, I think we're definitely like good and ready to go for most of Heat 2. It was just,
yeah, we had people thinking outside the box and like contributing good ideas for things. And I think that's definitely encouraging to see. So even though we didn't really have as much success as we wanted to have when we went in there, like, I think a lot of us have the right mindset, and a lot of us well, the majority of us are team oriented from what I've seen, and the people that I didn't see that from, I'm not saying that they aren't team oriented. They just didn't have an opportunity to show that, but I'm sure they are, you know what I mean? Like, I have confidence in everybody's mindset when it comes to making sure that the group succeeds. So it'll be fun going forward as long as everything goes the way that we want it to.
Yeah.
There was pretty much like small micro changes. I mean, you had it in Heat 2, and going through trash was super easy. Going through the first 3 bosses was super easy. And I unfortunately lost the world boss at Gar. Like that first try, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna chance this and just kind of see what it is. But then after I lost it, it's like, okay, what does playing without the ball buffs and the heat to like look like? That kind of gave me more experiences with that. But like, yeah, guard catching you off guard with a small mechanic, maybe that was slightly added into it. Probably definitely like caught you off guard and like made you like rethink twice. I mean, the first three bosses kind of like left me off guard because it's like, okay, I already know this and not much is changing. And all of a sudden
Yep.
you get a big wake up call. It's like, okay,
Gar's
well,
a big wake up call. Oh my gosh.
so like I definitely enjoyed it. I don't mind progressing a little bit here and there. But just I guess the whole jumping between Heat 1 and 2 and then maybe the Heat 3, uh just got to be more aware of like what little mechanics slightly change. I've just noticed that like if you add in a new mechanic when you're already tunnel vision on a boss, it's very easy to make a mistake for that reason.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's definitely weird, but I think I've got a much better strategy built in for next week. So I think we'll have a lot better luck. Also, we'll actually have heals. We had some major issues with heals and magic dispels. So we should be a lot better off. And I think we're actually going to have 2 Shadow Priests next week. So that's going to be help with dispels and also help a ton with healing. So
That as a mage, it really sucks losing a hot streak to go to like rune into the spell. It's such like a pivotal rune, but like I don't mind doing that to help out, but it affects like my damage and procs.
And you
Yeah, we
guys
should just
already
do
have
the-
to decurse, so
We should just do the restorative potion thing.
I've tried to tell everybody to bring those. It's saved my ass every time on that first boss, because with all that cleave in there, it can get scary AF. So I don't know, but yeah, I think all in all, we got some new people too. We have a lot of old people, but we have some new people. I mean, Zanks here is one of our new ones, and he won like 9 pieces of gear the first night he came, so we had to keep him.
It feels like he's been here the whole time.
Yeah, it's kind of been here. Like I definitely have to tell you, swapping from phase 3 to phase 4, switching factions, and just completely restarting over, gave me a whole new, brand new perspective on like how the game's been playing out so far and how it's been changing. I mean,
It's definitely a
it
different leveling
definitely
experience to like do it as it
it
was
was.
happening, as opposed to leveling up now. Like, yeah, totally different experience for sure.
It is a massive time commitment. Like I said, like I kind of play a little casual. So back to the guy's caller, I emphasize with the amount of time necessary needed because right now I'm farming gold for an epic mount, and like I'm also leveling professions, and like I'm still trying to play catch up like with everything. Even though like phase 4 released what about like a month ago, I can't believe it's been a month. I think.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. You were talking a little low.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I think you were just
You just got a little too far away from the mic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
just,
so your
just a little
nose,
bit closer.
your noise gate was going out a little bit. I
Give
think
us some ASMR, dude.
you have to make
No,
love
but-
to the mic.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, like restarting over, it's hard not to, like I said, 2 weeks before the phase came out, Guild decided we're not going to continue for the next phase, and restarting over and been playing for that full month straight and trying to play catch up. I can definitely tell you, it's if I'm not pacing myself, I could easily burn myself out, like having to farm all the gold, farm all the runes, do all the attunements, do all the rep grinds,
Yeah.
just redoing everything, and like it's a lot. And if you're like a new player coming into SOD in phase 4, there's a lot to do. Like
Yeah,
there's
it's
just
very
so
easy
much
to-
worth of stuff to do.
It's very easy to feel overwhelmed. Like there's definitely a fine line between having enough stuff to do that you feel fulfilled every time you log in versus feeling overwhelmed when you log in. Like it would behoove Blizzard to try and make sure that doesn't happen, because like getting new people to play, like that's important to make sure that they don't feel overwhelmed. That was one of the problems that people had with getting into retail, is that there were so many systems in the game, especially like if you're getting into the game late and into an expansion. it can feel overwhelming. Like there's so much to learn and there's so much to do. There's like a laundry list of stuff you got to do before you can like start doing anything really. Just too much to know. And like we're already almost at that point. It's phase 1 of level 60 content.
I play all day, most days, and I was overwhelmed when phase 4 came out and would end up standing in town for 30 minutes just trying to decide what to do and what to progress on first. That it was rough, you know. So if that's happening to me, definitely happened to a lot of other people. So
dude, like I sacrifice like my enchanter bot, tailoring bot, and alchemist bot, like not really bots, but my alts that I would use to farm these professions. So like losing 450s with like 3,000 gold was like a big jump.
Yeah, it shit sucks.
Yeah, very different.
I wish I could just like take that gold and just transfer it over, but can't do it. It's the one aspect of classic.
That's how I was when I switched. I played on Mankrik in from 2019 Classic all the way through until like phase 1 of TBC, and then Mankrik. Like I played Alley side, and then Mankrik, like Alley side died basically, so everybody went to Pagel. Like some went to Westfall, some went to Pagel, and I didn't want to go. Like I'm pretty sure I've told this story before on the podcast. I didn't want to go. I stopped playing for a while. Played Final Fantasy 14 for a bit, which is why I was talking about it earlier, because I've seen it firsthand. And when I came back, I finally swapped over, but I left some profession alts on Mankrik, and that felt bad. And then I leveled new profession alts on Pagel and had those for a bit. And then the guild I was in died, and I went back to Mankrik and faction swapped to Horde. So then I left those profession alts on Pagel, and I was like, God damn it, bro.
Really get punished within that. And I could say the only aspect about retail I like is that you don't have that issue. That's the only aspect I like about retail. And with war bands, that made the system a lot more like quality of life.
Yep. All right, well, let's move into time for the news. All right, so first off in the news,
that's my favorite zinger you have, Bob.
Yeah, we're so there's a new tunnel that will take you between Burning Steps and Searing Gorge and vice versa. And you can use the one on the Burning Step side or the one on the Searing Gorge side. They're 2 separate cooldowns. You could use them once an hour. And I believe I haven't done the dailies yet. I'm horrible. I haven't done the dailies at all. But I believe it's to help people get through the PvP in Black Rock Mountain to be able to do the dailies. You guys have been doing the dailies, I think. So
it's like a bypass, so you don't have to go through the mountain.
Yeah. And I believe Kago did a video on it, but I believe the entrance on Burning Steps is just like where the Horde flight path is, I believe. And then I don't know where it leads out to in Searing Gorge. Maybe where, I don't know, maybe the top or the east of the map, there's a cave there that has the one boss in it, or a quest mob guy, the lizard.
The elite lizard thing, yeah. I'll be right back. I'm just gonna fill my coffee.
But yeah, this is just like wanted to let everybody know that like that's there now. So yeah, check out Kago TV. He's got a good video that shows exactly where it's at and how it works. So just wanted to let everybody know. In other news,
this is like the Thorium Brotherhood like vendor. They add it. Because I haven't really seen that.
No, it's a warp between.
Oh, it's a warp between
Burning Steps and Searing Gorge, so you don't have to go through the mountain, and you could use it once an hour.
I see what you mean. Oh, that makes so like Horde does have a flight path between the two. I usually just fly between the two, but I guess that's a nice little change.
Yeah, and Alliance has a flight path between it too, but you know, it's probably pretty nice, and it could be in a different tunnel. I could be wrong on the tunnel. Yesway in chat saying that he heard it was a warrior rune tunnel, but I don't know why everybody's able to use it then. But It
It might be
says
a
that
bug.
it says that they added it. I mean, they said they added it. So I have no clue. But there is some elites in there from what I'm told, and like it's not like something that's easy to get through. So you might be right, yes, Wayne. It might be just that everybody's able to use it. They were like, okay, well, we'll just use it too for this. But I don't know. It's weird. All right. And then in other news, so they have basically found a new vendor, and they're thinking it's a new vendor for when we release Blackwing Lair.
All right, sorry, what I missed.
We're talking about there was with data. Oh gosh, I can't think of the name of what it's called.
Datamine.
Datamining. We found a new vendor, and they believe it's a new vendor for Phase 5 and Blackwing Lair.
Ooh, let me look at this news thing. It's the one thing I didn't look at.
Yeah, and it like could be.
Are you referring to the encryption vendor update that was done like 2 days ago?
Yeah,
There's a patch. There isn't like an NPC.
Oh, I did see this. Yeah, it's not a vendor, it's the vendor server.
Vendor server. Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Okay, explain it to me.
It's a private server basically for developers.
Yeah, it's basically their test server, their internal test server.
Okay.
So like I guess I'm reading it right now. It's basically hinting that Phase 5
is close.
Information is already coming close. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
they're
like
already internally testing it. Okay, thank you for clearing that
the
up.
current patch that we're on is 1.15.3, so the one that they push to the vendor servers is 1.15.4. So they're working on the next patch basically.
Okay.
And it's just Wowhead speculating that it's probably BWL. But we don't know for sure what it is, but they're working on something.
I do remember in an interview, I don't remember whose, they hinted something was going to come out between MC and BWL.
Oh, really?
Could be that. Yeah.
I hope it's new.
I hope it's new too.
Weird. This kind of ties in with what the person who left the voicemail is talking about, different dungeon stuff, like adding new dungeons and whatever. There's so many things that they could do with that, with adding new dungeons. And they did say that they're going to add new dungeon, new instanced content and whatever. Like, look at what they did with Demonfall Canyon. Like the first time that I went questing in Demonfall Canyon, I was like, oh, this is just an open world dungeon basically. With, you know, the mobs aren't elite or anything like that, but it's basically an open world dungeon. Like you go, like the section of Demonfall Canyon where like you go into that like, you know, like decrepit barrow den looking area where you fight those couple of bosses and stuff. Like pretty much anywhere in the world that has one of those is like an open world dungeon. Like Stone Talon Peak has the area where all those druids are. You know, that's basically an open world dungeon. The Shadowhold in Fellwood, where the Warlock quest is, like that's basically an open world dungeon. So there's a bunch of areas that are like this out in the open world that they could do a Demonfall Canyon thing where they turn this essentially open world dungeon into an instance dungeon, and there you go.
Be a nice spot because there's not much there.
Yeah, exactly.
With goes.
Like there's so many places that they could do this with. Like they're spoiled for choice. The area in the Blasted Lands where all those elite demons are, you know, like the area in Winterspring where the elite demons are.
Yeah.
So like there's so many places that they could do this with, you know, they're spoiled for choice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
They don't even have to develop new assets. They literally just instance the thing, scale all the mobs up, and, you know, give them some abilities and mechanics. Like,
yeah,
because that was one of the interviews I saw. I don't know if it was Josh's interview or just one of the interviews where I saw where the devs were talking about how like creating brand new stuff takes a lot more resources than people realize, which is why doing something like Demonfall Canyon was on the easier side for them because it was an already existing area that they just instanced.
They just use the layout to make an instance out of it. Yeah,
like so they didn't have to involve the art team with some of the stuff. Like there was all these things like already existed. They were already existing in the game files, and they just put them into a newly instanced area. So like they could do similar stuff like that. It would be new content for us to do, new dungeons and it wouldn't be nearly as much work for them to just turn some of these open world dungeons into instanced dungeons. I think
Yeah.
that'd be super cool. Like, I'd be super down to do stuff like that.
Yeah, would be cool.
Trying to think, you could take the whole Western Plaguelands up north where the Scarlet Crusade are, turn that into like a big, like 60-man raid if you wanted to.
Yeah, totally.
Or you could do that in Eastern Plaguelands.
60 man,
going down.
120 man raid.
Well, this is experiment, so like it would be funny to see something that was flexible like that. It'd just be a big giant war zone, like an Arctic Valley type of raid.
Yep. In other news, the Heart of the Lion once again has a 100-yard range. That is so far. It's crazy, right? I mean, cool, but can we get totems to have a huge range? Or
I think it's because Heart of the Lion is basically just a way for Horde to get kings, and when a paladin casts kings on their allies on Alliance, it doesn't matter how far away you are from the paladin that cast the buff on you, you just still have the buff. Whereas on Horde, if you want that 10%, you have to be close enough to the hunter to get the buff. So I feel like adding the 100-yard range is just a way so that nothing weird happens and a Horde aren't screwed because of range issues. But the hunter still has to stay alive.
Yeah, interesting. Oh,
It's
yeah.
just a nice little quality.
I didn't even think about that. We lose kings when all the hunters die. I didn't even think about that. Huh. And then last, could flex rating be coming to Season of Discovery? It seems like the devs are kind of thinking about this now, to where, because there was a bug where Molten Core, you could take in more than 20. And now people are thinking about just doing, it looks like they're thinking about just doing it for all of the raids, which would be interesting. I don't know how that would play out. And I don't know if they would try to do the thing that retail does where it gets harder or weaker when you flex. And then on top of that, what if they allowed Molten Core to flex down to 10? And then also at this retail, there's little sweet spots where you go up one more person and you get one more piece of gear. I don't know how that works, but it could be really interesting if they try to implement this in here. But at the same time, I hate leaving people out. So
the retail sweet spot is like where you get extra gear, but the mechanics don't get harder to deal with. So it's like there's like specific breakpoints where when you add one more person beyond that, it gets harder to do the fight for no extra reward. So like there's, everything gets gamified anyway. So it'd be interesting if they wanted to do something like that. I could see why they would want to, but they'd have to be careful with how few people they allow to go in there, because some of the mechanics are rough to deal with, even with 20, if you don't have the right comp.
mm-hmm.
So you'd have to try and do it with only 10. You would need like a pretty specific comp to still be successful, unless they like gutted it on 10.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think I like it, but I don't think I like the
So it's probably going to be exactly how Onyxia, Kazakh, and Azagos is right now. I think it was in Hammer's interview that they just don't have the technology to scale based on the amount of players. They were
good.
able to scale based on the 20 people with the option that you can go up to 40. It probably would be like that for the remainder of SOD, where it's just like, okay, you want to take 5 other people or 4? Go ahead, do it, knock it out. Like, if these raids are designed with an intent to being easily cleared, then I don't really see that being a big issue at all. I mean, the Heat 1, 2, and 3 are just additional challenges you can do just for the potential of receiving more loot. They didn't scale. Well, I guess that's maybe a lie, because I did see GAR NPCs increased by an additional 80,000 health to 100,000 health. They did make small little I did know small little changes, like the health pulls of GAR on Heat 1 to Heat 2 was probably like 300,000 health difference. I saw. I don't know. That's kind of based on what my add-on was reading. So that was something I noticed when we were swapping between both the heat levels. So there were some slight little changes.
I don't really see what the issue would be is if they were tuning stuff for 20 but allowed more than 20 to enter, because it would end up being sort of like a Vault of Archivon / Baird and Hold situation where like it's tuned like on 25 man in Wrath and in Kata with Baird and Hold. It's tuned for 25, but you only bring 18. You bring one of each spec. You do spec runs. So it's tuned for 25. But you can do it with 18, and most groups do it with 18. Just they do a spec run, and then if you want it to be a little easier, you just bring extra people, with the understanding that whatever extra people you bring, that's just making it a little more difficult when it comes to how loot gets distributed. So like, I don't know that I would have too much of a problem with that. Like if it's tuned for 20,
I'm okay with that. I'm
incentivized to run it with 20 because it makes it easier for loot distribution. But if you want to kill the bosses easier, you can bring extra people, but the trade-off is each person is less likely to get a piece of gear because there's more people in the raid.
Well, also Warcraft, if you're someone who enjoys checking your parse every week, Warcraft logs would invalidate your parses, basically. So that part would kind of suck.
Well, that kind of goes back to the whole casual. Do you want to just raid with a bunch of friends and have a good time socializing? Or do you care about the parsing? It's two different concepts.
I don't know. So, I care about just comparing my parse week to week, and
like self-improvement as opposed to comparing yourself to others.
Yeah, and so therefore it's just like it would be kind of a bummer for me because I'd never be able to kind of really tell where I'm at. But it would also be really cool to be able to bring everybody, that you want to, and just have a bench, that could be,
It feels bad to cut people, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, in this situation, let's say 2 people don't show up from the original 20, you still have a bench to pull from, and it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it would make things a lot easier, and then instead of having to struggle to find somebody, if somebody can't get out of work or whatever, whatever different things cause people to miss raids, it would be kind of nice just to have like, a group of 25, and then.
Or they're playing from a hotel and their add-ons don't work.
Yeah, like it would be kind of cool. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. But, this is Season of Discovery, so I say pull the trigger. Fuck it. Like
they can can try whatever they want as long as they learn from it. Like that's what this is for.
I would probably let it exist for a tier and decide whether or not you keep it or you just like get rid of it.
Oh, maybe.
It'd be crazy if they went the opposite way. If they allowed ZG to be 40 instead of 20, like they went the opposite way. Like they scale MC down, but then they scale ZG up. Like how nuts would that be? It'd be so funny.
No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
Oh, total tangent, but ZG. No, there is a hard mode. Like ZG is like the real first hard mode of fight in the game. People talk about, Wrath was the first hard, whatever. Like, no, Hakar was the first hard mode. You could still fight Hakar without taking down the priests. He got abilities. Like each of the priests give him an ability, and then when you kill them, he loses the ability. You could fight Hakar without killing the priests, and you don't get anything extra. You don't get any extra loot or anything like that, but it's possible to do. And I don't know that anybody did it in original vanilla. Here's an idea.
Jogging back memories of that.
I don't know about original.
I was just trying to remember why we killed the priest.
I feel like EJ tried it, or maybe I don't know if because I remember seeing a video from Ian when he was in EJ playing as shaman, and I remember seeing a video from a long time ago of them like most of the raid was like on the lower floor, like they cleared the trash on the lower floor, and like they had all the warriors up top and the bosses being tanked at the edge so that everybody was LOSing from the mind control except for the warriors up top. And I don't know. I remember them trying it.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry for the tangent.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting. I think
would be interesting. I don't mind having a challenge. It just depends on what the community decides because, like I said, T3 and Heat2 were designed for that reason to appeal to those players. So, like, I don't mind them adding that, but then there's a majority of people who are like, we don't want that. We just want to get loot and get out.
Oh, shit. Is ZG coming? Is that what's maybe coming to the, like, will ZG come out before BWL?
It might. Depending on, because they added Dire Maul into this phase. Dire Maul wasn't until later.
Yeah, I could see them doing it because, like, in OG Vanilla and in 2019 Classic, like, ZG didn't come out until later, but people would run it as like a sort of like a catch-up raid where like you do Molten Core and ZG to get ready for BWL, like that sort of thing.
And
So,
yeah, there was some like BIS stuff, like for different classes and stuff in there. Some
or just
stuff.
differently itemized things.
It was real huge for caster hit too. Then
plus, like, there's, I mean, we had some Zandalar stuff going on with Phase 3 with you know, you got to go to Yojamba to get your stuff. So, like, I don't know, it'd be interesting to you get Zandalar rep from doing that stuff. Like, it's capped, but be interesting. Like, I could see them doing ZG with 115.4.
Yeah. How that's gonna tie it into the Blood Moon event. I wonder if they do something to kind of tie that together.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
That would be kind of interesting itself. I mean, be a new spot, but like you can just arrive there all of a sudden, Blood Moon's going off. If you don't remember your Zandalar buff, just get destroyed by your own faction heading to ZG. I'd find it funny though. It's like, oops, you forgot to turn off your Blood.
Oh my god!
I think would it be interesting? Sorry, another tangent, but you know, speculating here again with the open world dungeon thing. Jintha Allure is kind of an open world dungeon. What if like 115.4 is ZG plus Jintha Allure becomes an open world dungeon in the same way that Demonfall Canyon did, where you do a thing, you get an instance version of Jintha Allure, you fight your way up to the top and, you know, fight bosses along the way and stuff like that. And it's a new dungeon and a new raid for 115.4. Reimagined, like not necessarily reimagined, but updated-ish ZG with, you know, loot that it has different stats in the same way they did it for Molten Core. The ZG sets would be interesting. That'd be like how our caller was talking about new dungeon sets. The ZG sets could become actually good instead of like meh. Like, I don't really know many people that use the trinkets were good, but the actual sets,
Interesting.
Like a 1.5 to before version 2. I could see that. That'd be an opportunity to kind of like do something like that.
Definitely, we did have a 2.5.
I'm open to it. I'm open to new raids, new dungeons. I want new stuff. Give me new stuff. Like, I like that they, I guess, redid BFT, Nomer. Nomer wasn't really like one of my favorite dungeons, but they at least made a try with it. And the same thing with Sunken Temple. But you know, I like them doing that and creating new stuff. Like, give me both. Like, I like to see a different perspective. I guess making BFT more Twilight involved and make that more involved with the storyline. I really like that they emphasize on like the Emerald Dragons within ST. So as a lore nerd in classic lore history, I really like that. That was just like really appealing to me. But I get it that people just want new stuff. They've already ran this dungeon, but even though the bosses are new, mechanics and everything has been tuned differently, I see that as new, but some people don't. But new everything is what I want.
Figure stuff. Shadowy Figure's been real quiet.
All right, well, I'm going to move us on to
Bobby, we need to have a talk about this World of Warcraft Classic. Do I look like I know what a WoW token is?
All right, so the discussion this week is, why is SOD not more popular? The recent numbers came out, and I was really hoping, you know, we had a huge jump, you know, last week, but then this week we just had a little increase, and I was kind of hoping for another huge jump, and it didn't happen. And so like Zanks here said something to me that I'd been thinking for a long time. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show. I've mentioned it on my stream, but I'm not sure if I've mentioned it on the show. But I'll let him explain why he thinks, but why he thinks SOD is less popular, and I'm very similar in what I think.
Before we get to that, I gotta use the bathroom, so I'm gonna step away for a second because I get to take care of this.
Oh, no problem.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll do a little filler question. Yesway asked earlier, what do we think about removing add-ons completely from the game?
That's an interesting question. I've seen people say this a lot. I think the thing that first pops into my mind when I think about that prospect is the purpose that add-ons are filling, because there's a difference between different types of add-ons. There's some add-ons that just are there to improve like the UI and make things easier to see, like stuff like like Bagnon or Addy Bags, Dominoes, Bartender, like stuff like that. There's those types of add-ons that are just to make the game easier to see the stuff that you want. And then there's stuff that like changes the way that you can play. Like weak auras is a pretty powerful add-on when it comes to like it can do some level of automation of certain things. And you see stuff like the Foji's weak aura packs that are basically boss mods and things like that. Like those things have a pretty huge impact on the way people play the game. And I would separate add-ons like that from the UI stuff. Like the UI stuff is like people wouldn't need those add-ons if the base UI allowed you to change the UI in that way to make stuff easier to see. But then the stuff that makes the game easier to play because you know more about what's about to happen or whatever, that stuff I could see a case maybe for limiting that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I can see outlawing certain mods, but I mean, I'm just going to be honest, man. I really love mods. I love being able to change up the UI to the way that I like it. I love being able to have different things to show procs, and they would have to do so many things to quote unquote fix the game before I would be feeling, good about it. Like for instance, my ambush procs, like I'm not going to notice that buff show up at the top right of my screen. You know what I mean? I'm not going to that's not going to happen. So they'd have to really improve the way the UI works to make that happen for me. And I just don't think it's something that I would want them to spend development time on. But yeah, there's definitely add-ons that I think are a little too much.
So I'm back.
Hey.
Anyway, so mind if I take over?
Yeah. Let's jump back into why SOD is not more popular. And this is pretty much, I agree with, I think pretty much mostly what he's going to say. But I think it's the biggest reason SOD is less popular.
So we're playing a state of classic that's not really discovered, and that's completely altered the entire meta. And changing the game like this completely alters like what the min-maxers knew has the potential to min-max. Like people stacking up on Arcanite bars and people like getting ready for the economic or using that too in order to make gold making. Or even just like warriors were the high DPS class, now hunters are very high up there along with feral druids and like warlocks. And like we're now seeing an entire meta shit change completely. So like classes you think that were going to be amazing at 60 now probably change a little bit unless you were like experimenting and like, playing around with the classes and at all trying to make sense of it. But also like the state of the game has been played out recently within the last 3 or 4 years ago. So like I do think there is some sort of a nostalgic factor that's also involved with that. I can't really contribute to this to entirely one thing. I mean, people just played classic back in 2019. It was like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was like a long gap before we got a re-release of like vanilla in itself. That was like almost, I want to say like 2019 compared to like 2004. There's like a 15-year gap to let that stuff like build and get people like intrigued into it. And also the community in itself has changed entirely in itself because now that the whole 2019 meta got established, now that mindset of the game is more incorporated with this version of Classic. And like I mentioned, like the community back then, from what I remember, 2004 was more open-handed and more like willing to discuss things and allowing to like let things fly if you're like the wrong spec or the wrong build. But in this case, it's like, if I walk into a raid, like a random pug, not with Bob's raid, I want to play Frost, you'd be looking at me like, it'd probably do okay damage, but it would do nothing in comparison to like fire. And there's just the player immersion and player behavior has like altered entirely differently. And I feel like the casuals are not like, I would say, are not having, I want to say they would have an equal say, but they're not really speaking out as much within transparency about like what they want or what they want to do. I mean, it's only recently that I've noticed that like more of the people that don't play super seriously are now starting to like speak out. I think my reason for wanting to speak out a little bit more is because I'm generally concerned with what Classic Plus may become if like people don't speak their minds and don't actually like express what they're like actually feeling. And this is just kind of one of those states where like, yeah, I thought there was gonna be a huge bump within phase 4 because it's now officially the end game. But you also are finding out like it's changed so much that it has almost like I mentioned, like I recently re-rolled and switched classes and changed factions. That was a massive time sink. And not everybody has that like flexibility and freedom to do that. And I've noticed the community has gone to this sort of like, new content releases, all new content's like done within a week or two. And then like I get trolls and people saying like dead game, dead game. And it's just like it's like,
I mean,
oh
it's
man, you
definitely
just
not
released
dead.
like
It's just not
it's
as
not dead.
popular as I thought it was going to be.
No, and for some reason, the casuals, they feel like they're left behind. Like, there's actually 3 months worth of content to do, but because you're not caught up or prepped like them, you're always playing this like catch up game, and definitely not fun on being on an end. But also, like, if you love the game and you want to play it, you'll definitely get to the end game stuff. You'll definitely get to where you want to go. Just find a guild right now, and this kind of harpers back to GDKP because GDKP created an environment where like you don't need to be in a guild. You don't need to be, dedicated to a guild or dedicated to a roster. You just signed up and it was like, okay, like this is how you get in. And not to mention, if you don't have any experience on like how to obtain gold, RMT was such a really big thing in the 2019 version of Classic. Like it just got so normalized that like if you want to get in the game, go spend money on your credit card to go get like 1,000 gold and go do GDKP. That freedom to access content was a lot more easier in comparison to what it is right now, whereas you have to build social connections, social relationships. And I've noticed that a lot of players have now, and I see this within the retail mindset too, is that the game has been catered to be less MMO-ish to more of an RPG, like a single player RPG. And I think that's also playing into the factor of like why people aren't really returning because like when this audience was pulling from like it's pulling from the retail audience, it's pulling from like the pure classic, and it was trying to find a niche in between the two to try to balance out to like retain players. So like unfortunately you're not gonna, appeal to the retail players that have like 80 like a short attention span or like can get everything done within a certain quick amount of time. But also like this game is just really naturally time consuming. If you want to get into the game, you're just gonna have to dedicate your time and you're gonna have to have a community that's willing to support you with dedicating that time. I think a community plays such a huge role within the classic itself that Classic Plus has such a high ceiling that if it were to come out, it needs to be able to cater and it's such not really like cater to one specific minority group of players, but it needs to be able to uh, express that it can attract the casual players, the serious players, the middle of the oak of medium semi-hardcore players. It needs to be in such a way that like it finds that balance. And that classic team that I've seen so far, compared to like the last retail expansions I played with in like the last 10 years, has been like the most transparent uh, development team I've ever seen. And
Oh yeah.
if you speak out your mind, I think they will solely get to what you're trying to express. But this whole player behavior right now of dead game, or just being like the game sucks, please provide context as to why you think the game sucks or why you think it's bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that is
Or
such a huge factor.
even better so, provide a solution, a possible solution, you know.
And in
But
this
they don't want to
version,
do that.
like, no, they don't really want to do that. And not to mention, like, this is a seasonal thing. Like, are you really going to invest in a character that's going to be gone in like the next like 6, 7 months? Are you really going to invest your time committed to this, thinking that like, is it going to be worthwhile growing? I think if you can develop a classic that has like a longevity into it that appeals to multiple sub communities within the WoW genre. But the thing is, I see that the classic community is very loud and outspoken about how they want the game to be played. But unfortunately, I don't think that minority of people speak for a large majority of the player base in general. I think that they're active. They definitely express their mind. It's not anything bad, but like, you know, that majority of player base is, probably like 30,000, 40,000 players. But what about the other like 80,000 or 100,000 players compared to like the numbers we saw in phase one? What appealed to them to come and try something new like this game? We went from numbers from like 500,000 players to something like, I want to say like, I think the last time I checked Ironforge was like 50,000. So like that's
No,
almost like
we're up to like I think almost 90,000. I could check it real quick.
90,000.
The most recent one, but we jumped a ton. We jumped a ton just last week. Yeah, we jumped up to 75,000 last week, but then this week we're up to almost 80K. So it was like only a 5,000 jump. But you also have to think a lot of those numbers in especially phase one are also skewed. I mean, I was
yeah, they are.
raiding every three days with 5 tunes, and Table had 3, and my other buddy had 4, and my other buddy had 2, and it's not. There's definitely a lot of people who have quit, but there is. Those numbers are definitely skewed by that.
By the alts and by the metrics of like everything playing out. I could see that entirely because when you have all those alts logging in Warcraft logs and to whatever third party site, you're only going to get the players that are logging. But like I said, like I mentioned, the casuals do not log. They just play the game. They log in, and I don't know what representation of player base that they are actually accumulating for. Like I said, like the 450,000 could be a bunch of alts, but also could be a bunch of players from a different.
There could have been a
retailer.
Well, especially in phase one, there could have been a ton of people that logged or that actually, because if even one person logs in your raid, everybody gets counted. Every name gets counted. But with it being a 10-man raid, I bet you there was a good amount of raids that weren't even logged at all. So 10 people for each of those raids not even counted there,
Oh, I had a real life friend start within phase one. Like she came into the game. I was playing for a little bit, but she did not want to raid. She just want to collect stuff. Like she like her end game or whatnot, or her play style was just like, I'm just gonna collect pets, mounts, and just kind of like other generic sort of stuff, and just kind of like, show that off. But like it didn't really retain her that much to like keep playing. So like you definitely have different demographic of players that are definitely were playing in the early beginning of it. But also like the same thing too. Like meta's been solved within the original classic, and it's probably disheartening to some of the people that like are now like kind of clueless of like what to play, what to do. I think players should really just be trying to have fun in the game right now and trying to spread the fun and like the joy of the game and just like I see the community from an outside perspective, and I'm more of a casual player. I could play seriously if I want to, but I really don't want to. Like I don't want to like dedicate like a 9 to 5 job because I literally work a 9 to 5 job Monday through Friday, and then I want to come home and just like work all day long by grinding and basically doing a raid. I rather come in and do my 1v a week or maybe 2. I don't know. It just kind of depends on my mood. I'm very kind of like flexible in that sort of sense, but like not everybody has like that freedom to like play all the time. Like to have the freedom to like play when they want to. Like there's the barrier of entry for some people are just like, hey, I got off of work and I need to go to my guild and I don't really know anybody. you have to build those social connections, you have to build those social relationships, and you have to find a time that fits you. Like I said, like I had a warrior in phase 3, and I knew that trying to find a guild as a warrior uh, probably was possible, but I'd rather just switch classes and play a class that was like starting to appeal to me. So like I want to see the end of this. Like I want to see the end of SOD, and I want to actually enjoy it. But I'm just gonna play what I find fun. That's the reason why I had swapped to like the mage. I
Yeah.
maybe level the warrior on the side, just because it's always been a staple class that I've always played. So my synopsis of all this is that like I've noticed between the 2004 community and the 2019 community, and then it's like grown over time, has just generally been more negative overall. Because when I'm on retail, people rip on the classic community for just being generally negative, and then it's kind of like vice versa between the two. And this is kind of like the most polarized WoW community, and in some sense that I've generally seen. I'm not saying all of it's polarized, but there is more incentive for whatever reason, whether it be the streamers, the content developers, just the community itself, because this min-maxing culture has instigate this sort of player mindset. And I'm not saying that it's like a bad thing. It's just like I think the community itself, if it just communicates and just like kind of is able to express what they like and what they don't like, will definitely improve long term. I think like Classic Plus has such a high ceiling for that reason. But at the same time, it's like there's multiple types of people that play this game, and the worst thing you can do is just alienate these other audiences and other communities within
Well,
like this version of Classic or the game itself.
I think so. I think the biggest thing, and I agree with all of your points on the different things, especially GDKPs. GDKPs really killed a lot of the alt things for everybody, but I think
It was a massive quality. I'm sorry to cut you off.
oh, you're
It was a
fine.
massive quality of life to just be able to come home and just go into a raid.
Yep. And a lot of
It was
people
such a
really like
flexible
that.
thing.
Yep.
It was an amazing thing. Even I did it myself too. Like it's like, oh hey, like oh if I want to raid Thursday, okay, let me just sign up. Or if I want to raid on Friday or Saturday, I have the flexibility to kind of do that versus being
Or you can
committed
take a
to like
week
once
off.
a week this day. Yeah, you
Yeah.
could.
You
You
can
had the freedom to like
take a
do
week
that.
off. You're not screwing over a bunch of your friends and everything. But I really do think one of the biggest reasons is okay, so it actually flows into a lot more than just this reason, but you did mention it, like the classic Andes, they love the fact that they don't have to learn shit and they already know everything, and they love that. And we're talking about the private server players. They love to do it again and do it a little bit better and have a new plan of action. They know what's going to come out. They know what to save for the different phases to like set themselves above everybody else. And they don't have that now. And now there's a whole lot of work going into actually knowing how to play your class. And for instance, like I talked about earlier, I'm a rogue. I'm lucky as hell that Simonize is a thing. If Simonize wasn't here, rogues would be all over the place. Like, and we've got that for, you know, like nobody's made a ranged hunter guide, you know, on YouTube besides, you know, all I can think of is Kipso. And YouTubers push hype and streamers push hype, big streamers, not like streamers like me that have like maybe, you know, 25 to 30 people watching them, or, you know, lots of us in SOD are like that, you know, we're like 10 to 40 people Andes, right? But like YouTubers push a ton of hype, and there's no YouTubers because they can't just read a guide, you know, a written guide that was written a long time ago and make content out of it. And now they actually have to work to do it, and nobody's making guides on SOD, and nobody's making videos. That very few of them. You know, we lost some of the best talent. You know, Scotty J, he doesn't do anything SOD. You know, like we've lost all of these different creators, and it really brings the hype down, I think. And that's it's kind of a snowball effect. But I think people just don't like not knowing. And I think it's neat to like figure different things out with the runes and everything. But I think a lot of people don't like it.
Change is scary, basically. Like nobody wants to sit here and kind of like go through and not know. Like I said, this culture just it was easier back in 2004 to be like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, and you had a helping hand. But now, if you don't know you have a helping hand, you can just get kicked out of the raid. You're just
And
like because nobody wants to put that effort in to
and I
like teach you or help you with like learning something.
yeah,
Some
and
people
I
will.
think retail
Like,
players are actually like doing way better in SOD because they're used to change. Like they're used to, coming into a new expansion and having to relearn everything and, being okay with that. Whereas, and same with retail content creators, they're used to having to do, the new stuff and actually give you something new. And I think the classic people are not like that. They're just like, I know how to do this. Whoa. I don't know.
with the way the classes are, they remind me of more of a reform like Wrath style, like template with how they play, with how a majority of them play. Like I've experimented with a bunch of classes and leveled a bunch of them and just like gave it a shot and try. But like I said, there's a lot of nuances now within your like rotation, how you do versus like the classic like classes themselves were so it's like simply brain dead where like you didn't need to put much thought into like your procs, your rotations, what you're doing for stat itemization. Like this is kind of going back to like my 1 to 60 journey on a mage and reroll and all that. Was that like there's just so much nuances with these runes added into the game, and not to mention the classes kind of changed. I love it as a player that's been playing for like 20 years on and off, and but I just have 20 years worth of knowledge that just has coexisted with inside me within multiple expansion experiences to like understand like these changes I don't find to be an issue, but to a majority of the players that don't like the change, it's just like a big red flag to just get out and just be like, no, no, like I don't want to do that. Not to mention, like, are you willing to like and testing your kits out without like a target dummy? What are your opportunities to like test out without using a third party site to like skim and speculate based on like metrics of damage with buffs and stuff like that. But not every fight plays out like that entirely. So when you're learning a fight, you're learning your rotation, but you're also learning what happens in the boss and what's the best uptime, like cast advocate, or what's the best time to like wand, or what's the best time to like make minute little things that add up when you're really contesting for like the top 5 DPS. Like those small little things, even when parsing too, like really add up. And I have to say, like with the rune system, just overly complex for the level of intelligence of the players. I can see that in that sort of way affecting the players being like, no, I don't really want to take the time to learn all this out and figure it out.
Oh,
But
Dev,
like,
you're gonna get so in trouble. But
I
yeah,
don't care. Honestly,
IQ matters, and the average IQ in the United States is about 94, I believe. And I don't know what you're at. You seem like you're really high, but I'm at 135. So
I haven't
it's
really
definitely
checked,
different talking to, people, but they get really pissed when you bring up IQ. But IQ isn't how smart you are, isn't how knowledgeable you are. It's just your ability to learn and the speed in which you learn. That's all.
yeah. Then that's what I'm just not saying it more in like a Harvard thing to like bash on the people. It's just more like I'm very blunt of a person, like, and my personality has always offended a lot of people just for being openly blunt about like what I think and what I don't really give a shit. Or I don't know if you care
I
about swearing or not.
I used to
But
be
like,
like that. I used to
yeah,
be
but
like that.
like
I've
it's
learned
just
I've learned to pull it back though.
yeah. And it's hard. Like I also play League of Legends on the side, and that community is
Oh
like
God.
going nuts, like over thing. I've gotten in the habit of just like, you know what? I'm just gonna completely remove my chat. Like I'm just not. I'm just gonna play the game and play it and have fun. And just kind of like disregarding all these like small minute things. But like, I don't know. Like I don't really have. I don't. I guess I'm not too worried about burning bridges. But like, I just think realistically speaking here, the classic culture has captivated a sort of simplistic mindset about how to play classes, and now it's added some innovation into the classes to get you thinking. And I'm not saying it's bad, just you know, just think about it and just like put some thought into like how your class plays and what to do, and just like I've grown up in such a way where like don't be afraid to be like, I don't know this or I don't understand this. And
Yeah,
if
I
people are willing
preach
to like
that. I preach that
trash
to the
you,
raid and everything. I'm like, dude, you know, when we were doing the fire res, and I was talking to everybody after last week's raid, I was like, hey, if you have questions, DM me, DM San. We will help you get your fire res, and we won't tell anybody you asked. Just let us know, and we can help you.
I mean, that just plays a role. I mean, comparing when I play retail versus when I play classic, there's a big knowledge gap. And even the retail side of things, when I go onto that game, I'm just like, whoa, there's just too much here. Like about everything. Like the values of this game is nothing compared to like the values of why I play classic. Like the gear progression and development is so more rewarding in classic compared to retail. Retail is more like figuring out just like complex mathematic, like equate, like all these little stats and minute things. But that's
Well,
okay.
and
If you're the type of player that likes that, go ahead do that.
if you ask a question to your raid and they kick you for it, you're probably in the wrong raid. To be honest, like there's no dumb questions. There's only dumb people. So no, I'm just kidding. That's from New Heights podcast. Jason and Travis Kelsey. Sorry. But no, they're really, you're dumber if you waste people's time by not asking and fully understanding. You're kind of a dick at that point. Your better bet is, and if you're embarrassed, go ahead and ask it a tell to, somebody, or, like, but you shouldn't be embarrassed. Like like my first IAT job, I had a guy that went to DeVry and he literally knew nothing. Like I literally trained him on everything. And I hadn't even gone to school for IAT. I went into a different thing, right? And he didn't know anything. And I trained him over, a 2-year period and got him up to speed. But he would lie to people and make shit up. And people, not everybody catches on, but people catch on that you're lying. Whereas when somebody would ask me something that I didn't know, I'd be like, ooh, I don't know, but I will find out and I will let you know. I'll get back to you. And people respect that way more than you pretending that you know and
You pretending
bullshitting
and
them.
lying is basically burning bridges, and you're not even helping the situation. You're just like overly complex in it and making it so much worse than it is. Like you can just solve this problem then and there now, versus we're extending it for like weeks or months or like a day. Like just simple communication can resolve a lot.
Yep. And yeah, just talking about stuff, but people are very shy about it. And I think the classic community, just because I think that's why in 2019, when we came back, there was so much of that because all of these private servers were mixed in all over with the people actually coming back. And they were just like, you don't know this. Oh my God, you're an idiot, and it didn't need to be like that. I was lucky that I got in a guild that had a few private server players that had played Warrior, because Warrior was a hard thing to learn. And I came back and was like, I'm going to play Warrior because they used to kick my rogue's ass in 2005. So I'm going to play Warrior. And man, it was a learning curve. I watched tons of videos. Half of them were worthless because they were from private server rules where the shit didn't even work in, actual classic 2019. And then I just got lucky and had a couple people, Perkies comes to mind, that really helped me learn things like her heroic strike canceling, learn proper gearing, learn how to properly work with my rage, learn how to properly stance, all of these different things. But there was a lot of people that just got kicked out because they just didn't know these things. And then, it's just, I don't know. I think the community in SOD is actually not horrible.
I've definitely seen some very positive. Like the community that is right now has improved overall a little bit when you got people like Hammer, Evan Hart, kind of just speaking their mind and being able to fully express these opinions and being able to stick with it and kind of be able to communicate and also try to develop the community is a healthy thing. Um, but also to like you yourself, Bob, like just speaking and trying to get out and just trying to get people to play. But also like when I came back on the 2019 version, I ended up joining a very private server guild. I didn't even know that I joined like a private server like guild. I was just like, I got picked up playing a shaman, and I really wanted to play enhance, and I learned very quickly how much I hate parsing because all I did was drop Grace of Air and win Fairy Totem, and I wasn't allowed to Storm Strike because there was that 16 debuff limit. The whole parsing community and like, this is how you play an enhanced shaman effectively. You just auto and drop totems. Like that made my hatred so much. But like,
yeah, and
it was the best min-maxing thing.
And people talk about how they don't want class changes in vanilla, and it just cracks me up. It's like, okay, so you just want warriors to be gods, rogues to be demigods, and everybody else to be your little plebs that just do for you and nothing else. And I enjoyed it when I did it. I enjoyed being, you're basically, one of the heroes of the story, but that sucks for everybody else. It was like the Reinhardt meta or the Goats meta in Overwatch. I loved it because I was a Reinhardt main. It was the only time I ever made Masters. And I was the star of the show. Like every buff, everything was put into me. And I got to be front and center, but everybody else wasn't having a great time, So I just don't get. I think vanilla is a perfect game in the sense of the world, not in the sense of how the abilities and classes work. I think it was really good though, PvP wise. That's something that I really think. Like PvP was awesome as far as 1v1s went in vanilla. Like the only thing you really had to worry about was like warlocks beat everybody. But like
it was priceless memories from vanilla. And that is actually the most funniest thing I did was like my brother had an account and I had an account on Eridar. I was playing Alliance Hunter at the time in vanilla. But I wanted to play Horde and I ended up playing Horde exactly on the same server where my guild is on. And I had a funny situation with a friend back in Ventrilla, if you guys remember that.
Oh,
where I wanted to duel his priest at the base of Ironforge. I brought my undead warrior all the way to like the base of Ironforge to duel his priest because like I was getting so frustrated and annoyed with how to deal with priests. Back then, they would put a shield on, you generate no rage, and you just sit there just like pulling your hair out because you generate no rage and they're sitting there just killing you. And you're just like so frustrated. I don't know how to counteract play this.
Yeah,
they were ridiculous. Yeah. And then the funniest thing is as soon as like another player got whiffed that I was down there dueling my friend, all of a sudden I had another guild like trying to gank me while I was trying to like duel my friend. And then that turned into like my friend getting another priest and like mind controlling me, and then the other priest would heal me. So I had two pocket healers from the same faction healing me while I was killing like this random guild that like it started off with like 1 and then morphed into like 4, then morphed into 7, and then at some point I had like 14 alliance players trying to kill me, and like they sent me all the screenshots of all the players from this like one guild like harassing my friend and the priest that was like healing me. I was just like, this is just too priceless. These warriors were like just a wrecking ball with if they had a pocket healer, but in this case my pocket healers were the same faction.
Wrecking ball.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have a question for Table. Table's been kind of quiet, but
yeah,
interesting.
Cook, man, he's cooking up.
So Table was, kind of almost like maybe 1 foot out the door on SOD, and he's recently returned and he's fully invested back in. But maybe tell us what got you back into it and what brought the love back. I know there was real life stuff,
That's
that
literally
was
all
keeping
it was.
you.
Like I just couldn't. I didn't have the time to play, so like my mental bandwidth was so limited that I was like, if I put more mental bandwidth into this game, the only thing that's going to do is make me upset that I can't play it more.
Well, but I just recently watched a pretty good YouTube video of a guy talking about why it's so hard to get back into games. Like he's talking about single player games, but why it's so hard to get back into games that you didn't finish, but you got very far in. And he was talking about the roadblocks that life will throw you or anything will throw you, and then your mental state in getting back into it. So that's probably something a lot of people are dealing with when they're thinking about coming back to SOD. So like, what got you back into it? Like what really sparked you back into like just like, yeah, I'm in it. I saw you wrote it in our private chat, but I just want you to tell the story here for everybody.
Yeah, so I had some real life stuff popping up that made me not really able to play for the first couple of weeks of phase 4. I think I mean, obviously I can only speak for myself, but like phase 4 was the phase that it was the one phase that I was definitely looking forward to the most, because like as soon as I found out that like what runes we had up to that point, this is like, I don't know, this is phase 2 I'm talking about, where like the runes that we had access to in phase 2 were setting it up to me that I was imagining what it would be like to play with those at 60 plus whatever else they added in. And so I was like stoked for 60, because that's when the full toolkit is opened up, like all the talents you have access to and stuff. Cause like you look at the druid talent trees, and for feral specifically, you don't really have everything you need to like legit power shift until 60 anyway. You're always having to sacrifice something to, before you have access to all the talent points. Like in phase 1, you had Führer and like natural weapons and Omen. Like that's pretty much it. Like you didn't have any of this stuff. You didn't have and you were using Mangle because you didn't have the talents that would reduce the energy cost of Shred. And then in phase 2, like it was a similar deal where like you had to sacrifice something to be able to do a different part of the, you could either power shift or not power shift. And then phase 3, you could have leader of the pack and buff the group, or you could power shift. So it's like it's not even necessarily power shift. It's power shift better, because, you couldn't get all of the talents that you would need to do everything at its fullest. So I already knew going in that phase 4 was going to be the first time that it like actually felt like I was actually playing Feral again. So not being able to play for the first couple of weeks of phase 4 hurt, because that was the phase that I was actually excited to play. And that was what made it easy to come back, is because I was like, well, this is the phase that I actually wanted to play. Now that I can play it, I'm going to play it. Like, it wasn't like, oh, all this stuff got in the way. And it's like, do I really feel like going back? No, I was like actively already interested in phase 4. But like for other people who are playing other games, like I mean, this other games that I've played a lot of that I never went back to finish. And it's just, you forget about it. Like
dude, it's been a year and I'm halfway through Zelda, the newest Zelda. It came out a year ago. Still halfway through.
I still have never beat Link to the Past. You know what I mean? Like
I haven't beat the Final Fantasy 16, the one that came out.
New one?
Yeah, and I've beat 7 remake 2. Like the one that came out after 16, but I can't get back into 16. I'm like, I'd have to start over. Like
with like single player games, it's like, especially with a game where like there's specific mechanics of the game that you have to learn, it's hard to get back into those, because you gotta, if it's been long enough, you forget the mechanics, or you forget the muscle memory of the buttons that you're pressing and stuff like that, like how to dodge, like, but certain games it's easier. Like it's easier to get back into Souls-like games, because like the dodge button is pretty much the same in all those games. So it's like once it's just getting the timing down again. But then there's stuff like, if there isn't a quest log in a game, I'm talking games like Pokemon, where you start playing Pokemon and you're like, and you put the game down for 5 years or whatever. You pick it up like, dude, I don't even know where I'm at. Like, dude, I don't even remember what order gyms are supposed to go in. Like, it's
Baldur's
just stuff
Gate.
like that. And
I'm literally
like,
at the last. I'm literally at Baldur's Gate. Mel and Sod came out right when, like, we were at the very end of Baldur's Gate. We just have to like, we're halfway through the ending. Like, we just have to get on and play for maybe, I don't know, 4 hours, and we'll be done with the game. And we just haven't done it. And now it's like, is it too late? But what gets you back?
That's why it's hard to get back into games, is because like if it's been long enough, you forget enough stuff that you have to relearn it. And the concept of having to relearn things, like putting that time investment back in, like you already invested time into learning something, and then if enough time passes and you forget that stuff, you have to put that time investment back in to learn it again. And a lot of people just are like, nah, never mind. I don't feel like doing that. But for a game like WoW, like I've been playing WoW for so long that like there's certain things you're not gonna forget.
Like your memory, like
yeah, it's burned in there. Like
you mentioned with Pokemon, I have like Pokemon Red, Blue up to like Emerald, up to Emerald, just like printed in my mind on how to do that.
Yeah.
But anything beyond that, I'm just completely lost.
Yeah, you come back to it after a while. It's like, oh, I still haven't beat that one. You load it up. You're like I don't know, like X and Y or whatever. You load that up. You're like, I don't fucking remember. And I'm just gonna restart. Like, and then you restart, and you get a couple hours, and you're like, all right, I've had my fill.
Well, but was it what got you back into it? The fact that like you had a pretty we have a pretty robust, like tight friend group. That's I mean, a good 15 people that rotate and do stuff together with each other pretty much daily. Like, did that help? The fact that like when you came back, like we were like, oh, well, let's go do this table. We can go do this. We can stealth this. We can do this. Like, did that help?
It helped a bit. Like I still pugged a lot of stuff, but it was nice to run stuff with people I already knew. Like that was definitely fun. I mean, even if nobody wanted to run stuff, I still would have got it all done because I just pug it, whatever. Like I can tank. Like I have that privilege that I play a class that can tank and I know how to tank. Like I can get a group whenever I want. But like it definitely it helps getting back into a game. It definitely helps when there is something that is some source of familiarity or like people that can help guide you or whatever. Like that definitely helps for multiplayer games for sure. If it's been long enough that you forget, or you're getting back into a game that you haven't played for a while, and you're in people that you knew when you played before are still playing, and they're excited to see you again, they want to include you and help you, like actively help you get up to speed, so you don't have to like research a bunch of stuff because they're just going to tell you, like your friends are going to tell you. That's definitely a more fun way to get back into games. For me specifically, like I was always going to get back into SOD anyway. I was just waiting until my real life stuff cleared up so that I could start playing again. Like that's all. Like it's not that I lost interest and had to, be convinced to start playing again. I was always going to do it. I was waiting until the timing
It was
right
more
for me to
appealing
actually
to you
play.
at the very end game of it all, where you felt like your class was like completed in some sense. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like you knew you're definitely going to play. You just knew at 60 you're going to have everything that you were looking for.
Yeah, like the 60 was like, I mean, I said this before, like whenever one of the previous times I was on the pod, Bobby, where you were talking about like, oh no, it was like the topic came up like, is SOD dying or whatever. I think we were talking about this either during Nomer or during Sunken Temple. I was like, nah, it's not dying. It's just people aren't
phase
playing.
3.
Yeah, I was like, people just aren't playing as many characters as they were in earlier phases, and like it's 60 is when people are gonna be actually playing, because once 60 opens up, that end game opens up, that's really when we're gonna get to see what Blizz has been cooking for us.
But also
time.
Something that's different about you that I see that's not, a lot of our friends, are like our closest ones that we do stuff with constantly are looking into the runes and are, constantly trying to learn what they do and stuff. But the fact that you understand the whys about your class is what makes it probably less overwhelming to come back to the rune system, because you understand why your class works the way it does. And I think a lot of people understand the how and not the why. And I always pressure this. The why is the most important thing in everything in life. If you know the why, you can improvise. If you don't know the why, you can't. If you only know the how, you need to fight. You're going to be lost when you need to improvise.
That's like simultaneously one of the reasons why SOD can be intimidating for brand new players who have never played WoW before, and also for players who have done a lot of like private server playing or vanilla playing, like playing on Era a lot, coming into SOD. Because it's like, if you're a brand new player to the game, you have to learn whatever class you choose to play. You have to learn the basics of that class while also trying to figure out how these new runes are altering that baseline. Like, to understand how a rune affects the way that you play, you first have to understand the way you play. So like a brand new player to the game who's never played the game before is kind of at a disadvantage because they don't know anything about the game, and also there's this brand new system that's trying to mess with their ability to learn how the game is played by their class or whatever. So it's like, I can definitely see how it would be very easy to be overwhelmed by all of that information because it's all of the information of the base game plus this new system on top of that, and it's like it's just a lot. Um, and then also people who have been playing vanilla for a long time, like like Zanruki was saying before, like you have this level of knowledge, this bank of knowledge that you've accumulated over the years of playing vanilla for so long, and now you know now these runes are coming in, changing things up. So all of that information and all that knowledge that you've accumulated over the years, it's not that it's useless, it's that it's less useful than it was. And you don't have as big of an advantage over other players because some of the knowledge that you have accumulated is not as relevant as it was.
Not as substance as to where it is now. Like I also have the knowledge of like playing different retail expansions. Like I've seen so many iterations of the warrior class to understand like what would benefit and what would not benefit it. I mean, I'd say warrior is like my top class to like that I can comprehend the best, along with shaman and mage. I just happened to like raid all of like heroic lich king back in 2009 on a mage, and the only reason I re-rolled the mage was because it just felt like playing a wrath mage again, and that nuances is like was already rebuilt into me like from years ago, and from seeing different versions of it. I'm a little confused on a few small things that I'm still testing out here and there with like my dual spec, but like I'm not really afraid to try out a few things like the missile barrage proc with like arcane blast and the scaling of arcane blast at the moment. I mean, I think I'm just guessing here, but I think arcane fire may be like the top spec, maybe next phase. I don't know. Just kind of speculating on that.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is like about, and it's interesting for some players and frustrating and off-putting to others, where we have this new stuff and we have this opportunity to do new things that haven't been done in any version of the game because of this like weird kind of mix and matching thing where they're pulling in versions of abilities from different versions of the game. Like a great example is like for druids specifically, Starfall. That's from Wrath and onwards. Like that didn't exist in vanilla, so like having access to that is cool. And then having the Eclipse system from Cataclysm, kind of, but also not really. Like it's along the same lines. Like the Eclipse system is in, but it's not quite the Wrath Eclipse system, and it's also not quite the Cata Eclipse system. It's a totally different thing. Because and then you have Star Surge, which didn't exist in Wrath. It didn't exist until later on. So like there's all this other stuff. And then for Feral, like the Tiger's Fury thing where like it gives you energy, but also increases the damage you do by 15% while the buff is active. That's from Cataclysm. And the version of Berserk we have is from Wrath and onwards. And there's like a few other random things like Swipe Cat generates combo points in SOD, but it doesn't in Kata. Like Swipe Cat was first added in Wrath, and then it continues on into Kata. And it wasn't until later that casting Swipe would give you a combo point, but the SOD version of Swipe does give combo points. We have the Wrath version of Savage Roar instead of the Kata version of Savage Roar. So like there's all this mix and match things that it messes with the meta enough that like you can't just follow the Wrath meta or the Kata meta or the Mop meta or whatever. It's a totally different meta for every spec because of all this mix and matching. And then there's brand new stuff that's in too. So it's like it's take what you think you know, and like you can't throw the whole thing out the door, but you gotta know the class well enough to know which parts of it you need to throw out the door. And it's like that's what's confusing for some players and off-putting for some, but exciting for other players. Like those of us who like the vanilla base game and like the way that the game functions in its vanilla state, but it's cool to have this newer stuff in there. Like it's just exciting for players like that. But for people that would rather
Indeed, it is like you mentioned from Wrath, from Kata, from having these other abilities. If you're a player that's played the other expansions, you already have some knowledge. You have a lot more nuance, like understanding of how that class plays in SOD compared to like a new like an actual new player to the game is not going to understand all these nuances, all these runes and talents, and how like stat specs work. Because like going back to what Bob said, there's just no guides. There's just really no nothing. And like if you know somebody that's really innovative on the class that you play, it's probably best to speak with them and like figure this stuff out and like maybe ask them what are they doing. Like don't be afraid. And here's the thing, like here's my only gripe with SOD that I do not like. And maybe this is my own personal bias and opinion, but like I'd love to see something like a Brawlers Guild inside of like this classic version. I'm not saying it gets you any like gear or any rewards, but I don't mind like meticulous, like small meticulous like things that like a cosmetic item you can wear that you're the brawler king or something like that. The only reason I think that system somewhat incorporates well, because if you have multiple of these fights 1-on-1 that encourage you to use your runes to compensate for these fights, probably give you an idea of how you can utilize the class more efficiently.
What's brawler? Here, explain it to me. Is this something
So-
in retail or something?
Started to mop.
The Brawlers Guild started in MOP, and it was a feature that really appealed to me back then. It was all about like 1-on-1. It was you versus a boss, and you would do every single round. You queue up, you do a 1v1 versus a boss. In other words, there was elite mob that you would fight, and I ended up getting brawler rank on my warrior and on my mob.
That sounds awesome.
So like every fight was very unique to like what you could do, and it was kind of in Legion. They had a thing called like the Mage Tower, which is almost like a class specific boss fight you had to fight individually between the two. I mean, having a system like that that could challenge the players that in 1v1 fights to like utilize a kit will probably just like help develop them even more as a player. I mean, because if you can get by like, you know, the biggest challenge was getting by like rank 6 fight. So like your first fight was always easy. Your first like 1 to 3 fights were always easy. Your fourth fight had you like look at mechanics and like pay attention to that. Fifth, your sixth, and then seventh, and then like as it got beyond seventh, the fights got more intense, and like, you know, like I was harping back to the Brawlers Guild and the Mage Tower, like, like I don't want that content to reward gear, but I want it to be able to challenge people that encourages them to think about their class and like what they can do with all these runes.
So something that was similar that made me a much better player on the classes that I used for it is. And it's not similar to this, but I think it does the same thing. Teaches you to use your entire kit and really think outside the box in a lot of ways. Was hardcore. Hardcore taught you to like really utilize all of your kit because you needed to, or you were gonna die. Right? It wasn't like, oh, I'll just throw myself at this a few times and see what happens. You know, like you really have to think about it prior to doing like a crazy pull or doing a crazy tough quest.
I feel like it's along the same lines, except for like Brawler's Guild or Mage Tower is just less punishing, because if you fail, you don't have to start all the way over from level 1. You just start the challenge over.
Start the challenge over. I don't mind if you just start where you left off at. Like, I just want some sort of system without target dummies that allows people to like test things out and just like freely figure out their class versus where it's like you know, and playing around within raids, a lot of people are not going to be like, hey, what are you doing the spec? Like your damage is like 1,000 DPS less. Like, what are you doing? You know, people are more punishing on that if you're trying to figure out, and without target dummies or anything along the lines of that. So I think just, I'm not saying make the game an RPG, but just make it so that like players can dig more deep into their class by putting them in these hypothetical situations. To like really
the closest we have is like if you do a tribute run, the ogre ghosts at the end that are like on that little raised platform ring, like half circle ring thing behind the king, like you can attack those and they won't attack you back, and that's like the closest we have to target dummies.
No, we have target dummies. No, we have target dummies there for
the ones in like Shimmering Flats.
Yeah, for the warrior quest. But why do we not have target dummies? This is so dumb. Like, I've been asking for this since 2019. Like, target dummies give people a fun time to, like, you could test your stuff out, you could work on it.
Brother,
like,
did you just say the F word?
It's, dude, I mean, like, I remember when I first started playing Feral in Wrath, I asked Table, hey, I got raid GDKP like in about an hour. Can you train me how to play Feral? And I was like, I need to know the whys, you know, and like, and we went, and if he didn't have the dummy to show me stuff and like let me look at like details and everything, it would have been a much harder thing to do.
Oh yeah, it would have just been a word salad.
Yeah,
it's just like talking at you and you being like, okay, well, all right.
I just don't get why they don't put them in. They're in the PTR, like put them in the game.
The thing is that maybe their concept about discovering is like playing the game as you go along. And by providing like an object that's equivalent to like a boss or to like a very high level mob that's just like casually sitting there allows you to kind of like speculate more on this information or
But
maybe have
isn't
more
that
better
cool?
critical information. No, I think it's cool. I think it's good. Maybe that's just the design philosophy that they had with this sort of point of view. I'm willing to compromise on that with like the Brawlers Guild by creating fights that challenge you
And
by
see,
having that as a target dummy.
I
But
would be okay with that. Like that sounds really neat to me. And like, yeah, that sounds like really neat. But I still just would like to be able to try different things out without having to log into the PTR to do it. And, it's, and it's also just so good to practice. In Wrath, I would just be like, all right, I'm going to do a 30-minute target buddy dummy practice. I'm going to do 3-minute sessions. I'm going to do 10 of them, and then I would do 3 minutes, and then I would try different things, that I had read or heard was min max, but I wanted to see it for myself. And I also wanted to see it like Table remembers I was really like trying to figure out when I could go armor pen on Rogue, and I felt like on combat I could do it earlier than I could, but I still had to redo all of my gems and shit, but I did it, to do an hour of testing, right? And like it was fun. It was a good time, like just getting to like just hit on the dummy and just also. Even if you're not testing stuff, it's just a great way to practice. People
keep the rust off.
Yeah, people want to practice. Like if you get muscle memory down, you are set, man. Like it makes everything so much easier. But there's no way to get muscle memory down in the open world. Like I'm going to play a completely different spec. I'm going to play backstab because, the raid spec mutilate is dog shit in dungeons. So I'm not getting any practice there. I'd love to just, get that muscle memory practice. And I wish they would tell us why we don't have training dummies. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I
don't know.
would like that, but also I'd like some sort of system that will help you to brush off the mechanics. I see myself making dumb mechanical mistakes, and if I could do something that I can grind out the rust beforehand, I'd do so. Like usually my mechanics whenever I'm playing like League of Legends or so or something like that god awful name to a lot of WoW players. Usually I die within the first couple of times, but after like one game, it's like, okay, I have like the principles down and everything back. Be associated, just like grinding off the rust. It helps. Like it helps to just get all the pointless deaths out of the way.
Yep. Vodka just came into chat and said we do have them in Chimney Flies. We did mention that. I'm just saying, like, have them in the major cities. Like, I for one enjoy when I run past those, seeing an alliance there, and I just ruin their day by messing up their
That's like the most
session.
annoying thing is like playing on a PvP server, like the things that you have to do to be able to test stuff. It's like you got the Shimmering Flats dummies, you got like the Blasted Lands mobs that people always use to level their weapon skills, that stuff. But that's in the open world. If you're on a PvP server and you're trying to do that, you're trying to test stuff, anybody could just roll up and just ruin your day.
Well, and then also different specs can change and different rotations can change based on world buffs and consumes. Do I want to pop my world buffs? I mean, I would probably kill like 4 people if they did jump me, but like, do I want to pop my world buffs and consumes like while I'm standing there in Shimmering Flats? You know what I mean?
And
but I would do it if it was in town, possibly. Like,
right. Like, yeah, or like if you're, like stuff like the crit, like especially like for me, for example, if I wanted to do any sort of testing, like it's the how many combo points I have available to me are going to change depending on how much crit I have. So if I do or don't have Songflower / Ani buff, that's 10% crit. that's a huge amount of variance in how I would be doing things depending on whether or not I have these buffs. So it's like, it's almost like you have to do 2 separate rounds of practicing, like for without world buffs and with world buffs, because the way that you play is going to be different. The amount of combo points that I have available to me is going to be different depending on whether or not I have all my world buffs or not. Like if I'm keeping them booned, like say on Gar and Geddon, if we're going to keep our buffs booned and not use them in those fights because we're worried about them getting dispelled or just failing at the fight or whatever, so we keep them booned, I got to know how to play without them. And then once we do have them, I got to know what to do. What do I do with all these combo points? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
just heads up though, they changed all of the world buffs to non-magic, so none of them can be dispelled from anything.
Oh, well, even if just dying on the fight, you know, because Gar's hard, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that.
Yep.
Like if we're going to keep them booned for safety so we don't lose them needlessly, like still like the way that you're going to play is going to be different because you have 10% less crit. Like,
yeah, it's completely different. And then you think back to classic 2019 Warrior, the spot where you no longer heroic strike canceled and you just did heroic strike on.
Yeah, you just let him go through because your rage gain was enough.
Well, but it was the spot where heroic strike became like it changed rotation. It was like it moved up above whirlwind once you hit 2000 attack power.
For the attack power scaling.
So heroic strike was actually prio over whirlwind at that point, right? So like there's a lot of different things that could change based on your buffs. And then also a warrior practicing, they're not going to be able to practice without world buffs. That's, you know, I mean, they could practice their once they die world buff rotation, but they need the world buffs to properly have enough rage to be using. That's exactly what I mean. Yeah, like everything.
For warriors, it's rage. For druids or for feral druids, it's combo points because of the talent that gives us extra combo points when we crit. Like if you're a rogue and you're at the level of gear where you're running like Seal Fate, then that matters too. Like the crit matters for that because of the combo point generation of Seal Fate. You know, if you're a rogue and you want to try out and see how Honor Amongst Thieves works out, if you want to try that as like a main build, you have to have 4 other people with you
or
also
even
hitting dummies to even have an accurate depiction of how many extra combo points you're going to get from hat. Like,
or if you run the one that gives you 3 energy every time a move or poison crits, like you need that crit stuff to see actually what it does. You need to properly test that. And I just wish like we had dummies where, you know, and that might take away the friction, but I wish I could just, you know, just like think about how you sim. we sim things, right? And I get lost for sometimes, like all of a sudden 2 hours go by and I'm like, shit, I've just been simming shit. But imagine if you could just do that in game and play.
Right. Well, either way,
you
like
could
even
choose what buffs you have. Only
even in
on
Wrath
the
and
dummy,
Kata,
right?
like the sims were still important in Wrath and Kata, but you would then go to the dummy to verify that the sims are depicting everything the way that they're supposed to, that they got everything right calculation wise. Like, and you go on it and you hit a dummy with whatever relevant buffs. Like you sim it with whatever setup you're going to have when you hit the dummy, and then you compare. You hit the dummy a few times, like however many times you want to do it, to make sure that like it falls within the range that it simmed you as, you know, being capable of or whatever. But like we can't really do that. We have sims for SOD, but like it's so much harder to verify that the sims are working properly and depicting all of the calculations the way that they're actually working in game, because the fact that we don't have reliable dummies to hit.
So how cool would it be if on the dummies you walk up, you click on them, and you could just do the same thing you do in Sims? Be like, while I hit this dummy, I have Mongoose, I have this world buff, I have this world buff, I have this, and then you could just work on the dummy as if you were simming, and then you could see how you play. Because Thoughtful in chat, our resident raid Hand of Rag player, says Sims also, you know, they basically predict you as playing perfect, you know, which most of us don't do.
there's stuff you can do in Sims to change the rotation prio in the sim, and you can change it to more closely mirror the way that you actually play. Because like there's the simmed method or whatever, like when you just load up the sim baseline how it is, the rotation that's built into the sim is like the quote unquote perfect rotation or whatever. But like, you know, that's all dependent on things like what your ping is like, and you know, like thoughtful saying whether or not you make mistakes, or even simple stuff like there's certain decisions that you can make in a rotation, and you might prefer to do it
Well,
one way when you play versus the sim recommends to do it the other way, but you find that it's a smoother rotation to play and it's more fun for you to do it the way that you like to do it. So there's a way in the sim to make it so that it sims it the way that you would actually play it, and not a lot of people know how to do that because it's not the easiest thing to do.
well, yeah, because it's always like kind of a patchwork type thing. That's where Zanks' idea of the 1v1 stuff would actually allow you to do things like, say you're a warlock, would allow you to do things when you had to, because mechanics are a big thing. And that's where people oftentimes lose their min-max. They can min-max the shit out of their rotation, but then they don't understand, oh, when I'm supposed to be moving, that's when I should be life tapping. When I'm supposed to be moving, that's when I should be using my instant spells, and those are huge things that go from fight to fight, And then on top of it with runes, I talked about it earlier, your shadow step rune on a Gar fight is going to be way better for rogue than the other rune that you could use. So
Yeah, because it lets you maintain your uptime.
yeah, who cares if you have 20% more damage, for 6 seconds coming out of stealth when you can't even get back to the boss, So it's cool.
With third party or even with just like the testing out won't really be accurate because there'll be a situation where like let's say you get punted from a boss. What do you do?
Yep,
Like you
that's
said,
where your
you
thing
shadow step with you,
works
Bob,
in.
and like what are you gonna do if like you're low health? What is prio? Is saving myself or in most of the cases a lot of parse brainies will be like, no, you can heal me and I'll keep DPS and even if it kills me. And it's your fault that I died. Like
Yep.
no, then like I think you have more uptime if you just live by making a small little mechanical change. That's all it is. And you pretty much would have kept your uptime and provided that like liability. But I mean, just understand the nuance of your class and understand how complex this game is. I think bridging and just that alone would probably help in the long term with like so many WoW players in general. But also, it's like, do you really want to invest the time and what are the resources you have? And a lot of classic client just doesn't have that many resources to like actually help you improve as a person without like a third party website or some other tool outside of the game. Like it's just that's how it was. And I remember when I played back then in 2004, the only resource I had was Thoughtbot. If any of you guys remember that
Good old
website,
Thoughtbot. Oh yeah, I remember.
I remember sitting there like tabbing my client up and down, like basically reading posts for like 2 or 3 hours, trying to comprehend what this person like telling me like what to do or to find this quest or to find this item. I
And
mean, even
then
some of the Thoughtbot things were just like a joke because they were just someone trolling you by making something randomly up.
by the end of Molten Core, I was using Elitist Jerks Forum, and boy, not going to tell you guys my username back in the day because, man, when you're young, you say stupid shit on forums. Not telling you my name. You're never going to know.
A lot of cancelable things.
Yeah, no. Nothing cancelable. I was just a dick. I was just a complete dick. Yeah. But no, I was never anything cancelable, but definitely saw my younger side
Not by
and my
2004
pompous
standards,
side.
anyway.
Yeah. Oh no, I've never been like that type. I actually had to raid with a lot of those types back in the day. That was horrible, but most of the people were cool. It's just usually the best people were the freaking guys like that. But
Well, it's always an ego thing when it comes to that sort of thing, and that's just unfortunate. It's just
I had a
most people
huge
are
ego.
that. Yeah.
Huge, like the size. Like I needed a wheel barrel to carry it around, and I thought I was the most important thing ever. But that just goes to show you, even with my understanding of the game and how to play back then, I still didn't get the concept that healers and tanks are the most important. I thought I was the most important because I could push my buttons better than everybody else because I actually researched on forums and shit, whereas most people didn't, you know. And
Remember Shadowcraft, Bobby, the website? You ever visit Shadowcraft?
I don't know if I did or not. That doesn't ring a bell.
Well, either way, the rogue section of EJ had similar stuff. I mean, say it with me. A dead rogue does
0 damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I played a rogue back then. That was one of the first things that I read on like somewhere external, other than in like, you know, like that's kind of how the game has always been. Like if you want to learn more about the game, usually you're not learning it in game, you're learning it outside of the game from somewhere else. And like, I mean, that's been true even up
But I
through
mean-
to modern. Like a lot of the lore has been in like books and stuff instead of in the game. So it's like it's a weird balance to strike where like it's cool that we have these third party resources to like help us with rotations like the sims and stuff like that, but it also is nice to be able to do the stuff in game too. So it'd be kind of cool if it was easier to do that. Like, yeah, we can go to the Shivering Flats, yeah, we can go to a cleared dire mall and hit the ghosts, yeah, we can go to the blasted lands and hit those demons that banish themselves. We could do all this stuff, but it would also be very cool if we could do it in org.
Yeah.
Or do it in Ironforge or whatever.
Or even like the thing they had in PTR, like practice work. What was his name? I forget. Was it practice work or something else? Like
Test work.
Test work. Yeah. You can just go in and like, I mean, you can just go in and you can just like give it a shot, you know, like that was kind of cool, you know?
And then that's the thing is by having these tools and having these resources in game, then you're encouraging the player base to get better overall individually when they have the tools and they're accessible. Versus whereas in like, you know, get good. That always comment that I hear, get good or something like that, or
Skill issue.
on lines of that, or like skill issue. That would just help the player base versus where the developers are like, well, we overtuned this boss and it's horrible and the players are complaining about it, so we'll just nerf it. And it always feels bad seeing a fight get nerfed because it's either overtuned and some people have the opinion that it's the developer's fault, but it's also like if the players aren't skilled enough to comprehend this sort of fight or what the skill level it needs to be at, or if it just needs to be right in the middle, which is pretty much ideal for classic. Like we've noticed that the scaling is different now that we have these runes and how things still kill you out in the open world. Just having these tools would just help improve the players versus as them like complaining on the forums that this is too difficult, you need to nerf it, you need to cater to like dumbifying the game. And I'm like,
yeah,
you
like
don't
the
need to do
devs
that.
test stuff themselves too, but like they aren't players. Like they do play, but because of the fact that they're devs, their mindset about things can't be the same that like a regular player has,
because they know exactly how the mechanic works.
Right. So it's like they can test things to make sure that it's scripting the way that they wanted it to or whatever, but they're not necessarily always going to interact with the content in the same way that a regular player is gonna. So like that's why they have QA. Like you know what I mean? Like the devs aren't supposed to do their own testing all the time because they are going to do things differently from the way a tester would or the way a regular player would.
That kind of harpers back to like I remember back then, early Blizzard days, like TBC, Wrath, and Vanilla, and even into early Cata, the developers played the game. They legitimately played the game as players themselves. And bridging that gap was so much more easier when communicating with things. And I think that really was like refined the classes up into Wrath to like comprehend this and to like fully understand it entirely and be able to make that. But like the developers, I don't expect Agran to understand how I play the game or how the majority of the base of the player game plays. He's going to play it the way he wants to.
I know he's a dirty pally.
Like,
sorry,
it's okay. But like it's hard to find that right balance or that right ground. Like Aranicast, when it was first released, was just like way too overtuned, and that was something that needed to be addressed. But like, you know, having these tools and having them at all help and address the stuff kind of gives a general sense of like where things need to be.
I
But
think
like
that's part of why they
that's
decided to do a PTR for Phase 4, where there
I think
wasn't
that
a
is a more
PTR previously.
indeed. I think that's like more intelligently more handled. I think even with the first like 3 phases with like no PTR, you're just kind of like winging it, and then you're just like, okay, a fire started. That was expected to be happen. Like that was just expected to happen. Like, and I work as like a network engineer, so like when I implement something, it's just sometimes things go bad, and sometimes they just like don't work out as you think as intended.
Sometimes, more like every time. That's what I used to do.
Yeah, and like it's so hard to like what you think in your mind is the ideal thing, but like compared to somebody else, probably not the ideal thing. So like finding that balance and addressing it, probably the best thing you can do.
Or even like not realizing where the back doors are.
Yeah, I think about how many times like you could just exploit something. And like when you leave exploits open, I've noticed the player base is really
Exploit
fast to catch
early,
on that.
exploit often. Often and early.
Like I had the idea. I don't know if you watched. I think it was Asmongold's like hardcore, like sort of like tournament, whereas the Makara tournament, where like you had a month to level up. There was that big tournament that happened in hardcore, and it was like Zico and Savix, I think, at the end. But like the risk and reward out of that fight was that like you have a month to gear up and have a serious fight, where it's 1v1 tournament. And I thought about the idea of like implementing. I don't know if you guys know in the back of Orgrimmar, there's that arena which is never used and has
I
been abandoned for a
know.
while.
Yeah.
Which turned into the
Where
Brawler's
like
Guild.
it was kind of tied to the Brawler's Guild, but I had this idea of where like you could queue up in a 1v1 tournament, which this is a compromise for the PvPers. If you're a big PvPer and you want to play a lot of risk, I think you should be able to offer up a piece of your gear as a potential in a high risk reward
Gambling.
fight. Like I know people love to gamble, they love to death roll. And I think that this would probably appeal to PvPers where like, you know, has to be a quality of epic or higher. And when you die and you lose the fight, that person gets to loot the item that you put as like offer, like as a potential. It's like if you lost that 1v1 and you put up your purge as a risk, I mean, hit a rogue that killed you, it's the purge for PvP. Like, I think that would be kind of a cool concept. But I also think of like how the player base would probably abuse this by like getting gear and putting it in this and then taking it off and trying to gear other people that way by throwing
Easy way to
fights.
interrupt
Doing, like,
your opposite faction alt.
yeah.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
mean, these are just. I think of some things, but I always think about like how can I exploit this?
Yeah.
It's just
I think
almost inevitable.
The base side, it's like a case, and it's so many ideas that have come up where like the base idea is good, but there's so many ways that it could go wrong that's like, ooh, like this is going to be harder than I thought. Like conceptually it's cool, but like, ooh, in practice, yikes.
Like I thought, like, you know, if you looted that purge, you could put it up on the auction house. It becomes BOE for like that 1 hour. You could decide whether or not you keep it or sell it. And I'm like, oh well, if I made it BOE, then we definitely rigging the auction house with so many BOEs.
Well, and
like
that's
that would probably
why
happen.
that's why the devs have such a hard time. MMO devs, and for that point, multiplayer devs just have all kinds of problems. Whereas you look at something like Baldur's Gate, single player, you know, you can do co-op, right? But at the same time, there's all kinds of shit you can exploit in that game that's awesome. But that would suck if it was a multiplayer PvP type of game experience. But it's awesome for that. So it's just like these poor devs, they're rocking a hard place. You can't win.
There's you could win, but I'm just saying you're not going to always win all the time.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, there's so many things that they could do that would be nice. Like we're talking about the target dummy thing. Like it'd be cool if they put dummies in. It'd be cool if they had more, you know, because like people love dueling in just vanilla in general. There's a lot of people that like to duel outside of the cities and sod and stuff too. So like that, you know, the org arena thing, or, you know, I'm sure there's an analog somewhere on one of the alliance cities where like you could queue up and do a 1v1 thing, like, you know, like a 1v1 arena thing. that'd be cool because then you wouldn't have to like go all the way to a city, and like you could even maybe even do it cross server and stuff instead of just on your same server. There's a lot of cool stuff that they could do with that because like 1v1 is a big thing in vanilla. So that'd be cool. There's like all these like different dungeon ideas, different ways to do loot, different ways to do rep, different ways to do attunements. Like there's so many ideas that so many people have had, and I don't know. It's tough to think of all the ways that this stuff could go wrong. Like you were talking about, like how could this be exploited? Like it's never as simple as like, you know, when people, oh, why don't they just do this? Like it's never that simple. You know what I mean? Like,
And that's a lot of feedback I see from a lot of players when they're emotionally outburst and like, so they're like, why aren't they doing this? Or like, I've watched a lot of different content creators and I've been sitting there like trying to get a view of everybody's like perspective of like what SOT is to them or like what they need to do in order to fix the game. And I'm just like, there's just so many compromises I see, let alone within like what their take is and what they think is idealistically for the game. And like I said, it kind of harpers back to like what is Classic Plus going to be? Classic Plus is going to be, and what is the ideal version of it? What is the best version of it that compromises for everybody's communities and how they play this game? Or like, or what is the idea of Classic to you, and what is okay? Like, and some people in Classic would probably think the target dummies are just like an abstract that you should never have that option to be able to like theory craft in that way. But I think you should, but I don't know if I'm the majority here.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I mean, shit, tons of people hate my takes, and probably the people that like my takes never even leave a comment because they're like, yeah, Bob. But they don't leave, you know, it's only the angry people that leave comments, right? Like often.
It seems like negativity has the loudest voice in the room, but positivity is the most successful when it actually gets through. Like negativity will get you nowhere, but positivity will get you somewhere.
But
that's just my say.
I would make the plea to everybody: if you're not digging SOD, but you're excited about a Classic Plus, jump in. Like, just jump in, because this is the building ground and the building blocks for what's going to be Classic Plus. Get your voice and your playtime heard. And like, even if you don't want to write anything, just you playing is going to give data analytics that will help them go in the future. Like, come back. I mean, that's all I gotta say. I mean, you're raid logging in Kata probably at this point. Like, come back. SOD, there's a shit ton of stuff to do. And, you know, you can still raid log Kata.
We're in phase 1 of level 60 content with what, four more raids to go. And, so, you know, they've hinted about new stuff. Like, and they're gonna do some new stuff. Like, we got a whole game ahead of us, basically.
And just to let you know, anybody who was turned off by the difficulty of Sunken Temple, I'm just letting you know, Heat 1 of Molten Core is miles easier than Sunken Temple. Like, there's, you know, there's no single person that's going to wipe your raid besides your tanks. Like, there's
so
like,
maybe on like Geddon, if they don't get out with the bomb.
Maybe, but on Heat 1, I mean, shit, like, you're probably fine. I mean, Heat 1 is easy. I mean, there's pugs. Hammer Dance has been forced to pug the last 2 weeks, and his pugs have just went swimmingly. Now he's leading them, so that's one thing. Well, no, the first one, he went to a pug. He led the one tonight. They just blew through everything. You know, he does have, you know, a core of like, you know, 5 to 8 people, you know, that he's taking, but still, like, it's just, you guys can get into it. It is not hard right now. So I'm just letting you know, just come back. Like, it's, you know, the only thing that'll suck is getting runes, and hopefully they're getting something fixed for that soon and getting a catch-up mechanic for people coming back to the game. Not alts. I don't care about alts. People coming back, because alts are kind of dead in Season of Discovery. I mean,
well, for now.
Yeah, like, I'm going to get my alt up and going here maybe in a month, 6 weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, give it like at least a couple more weeks, because there's still enough to do, like with like previous grind and reps and stuff like that. Like there's there's an actual reason for a lot of these reps to do. Like, people are just still doing their dailies at Thorium Point for Hydraxian rep because you want to get your Eternal Quintessence, like all this other stuff. You want to get a lot of people are trying to get Exalted with Argent Dawn so they can get the shoulder enchant, stuff like that. Like there's reasons that people are farming rep and farming things that will keep them playing their mains for at least a few more weeks. And then once everything is all set and they've run out of stuff to do and they're basically just raid logging and farming and stuff, that's when people will start doing alts. So like it's going to be another anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks, I would say, before we start seeing an increase on logged raids because people are starting to raid on more than one character again.
And see, that could also be when people who are kata enjoyers, go to the new raid and start progging the new raid, where if you only play Sod, that would be the time where you get your alt going, right? Like they are really, it seems like, trying to space these things out for the people that want to play a little bit of everything, and like that's cool too. So I'm just saying, you guys can come back and play. You guys can come back and play, and I mean, we would welcome you. We would love it, and yeah.
I guess my plea is like, if you want to come back and play, just come back and play the game. But like, when you leave and you quit and you don't enjoy it, just try to leave some like reasonable constructive criticism about why you didn't enjoy it. Because like my biggest fear with Classic Plus down the road is that people just leave too much negativity, like responses and comment back, that like when Classic Plus gets actually developed and released, whatever that time may be in the future, it's just like the wrong version of the game.
And it could be DOA.
They want it.
Yeah.
And then like Blizzard just says, well, actually Microsoft says, we just never take this risk ever again, and just like scrap the whole project. And then Classic team just lose all their like budget in at all to even continue this. So then they're just, then they have to do other things entirely. I mean, that's
and then we never get to fight
happen.
Master Chief in vanilla.
Hey man, I got a hot take that nobody likes. The Halo show is good. It's actually one of my favorite shows on television right now. I'm not kidding.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, and everybody shit on that. Like, sorry, Master Chief taking his helmet off worked great for the show. So, also, if you haven't watched that, then you should definitely watch that. So, just letting you know, like, I've rewatched season 1 and 2 3 times. So, just letting you know, it's fucking badass. So, don't listen to the vocal minority. They usually don't know what the fuck they're talking about. That's where I'm leaving it. Any last thoughts about what could I don't know what we talked about the issues. What could bring people back?
I think I know this is going to be like a controversial thing, but like at this point, I know a lot of people hate the XP buff, but it's really nice to have the XP buff to try to catch you up and go through the grind that is originally classic vanilla. Like that journey is a very long journey, but like when you're on limited time or you have other responsibilities, like taking care of a child or just like job orientation or just like real life adult, because I know most of this community is like in their 30s and like maybe in
40s.
And 40s.
Yeah, 20s is pretty rare. Like Lubes being 21 is like, whoa, baby.
Yeah. And that is rare. I've noticed that it's been very rare to come across like new, younger audience that are intrigued into the classic version of the game. And, I know it doesn't appeal because they're a different generation of how we play the game versus how they play the game. But like, it's a seasonal server. I don't care. This is a big, huge testing ground. I think getting people up and getting them incorporated into all the nuance of this game would probably just benefit a lot. I mean, that's just my last take. And then basically just play the raids, enjoy. I hope there's new content. I hope there's new stuff, and just have fun. Like literally try to have fun with the game. Like I know people like to min-max and do the parse culture thing, but like don't let that ruin your day if you're not the type of player that likes that. Just let them have that. You do you. Like
Questing's fun. Questing's fun too.
Yeah.
For the people that would like to catch up fast, just letting you know, heard this on Countdown to Classic, but I didn't know this. I guess the mobs right outside incursions give double EXP. So and they're not elites, and so if you have rest, you're literally getting like a half a bar per kill. Like,
Jesus.
So that was something Ubi and Josh Corbett pointed out on Countdown to Classic tonight. I watched like the first hour of it before we started our while I was
guess I know
doing
where
my
I'm
show
leveling
notes
my
and stuff.
farm alt.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, I guess. So,
I feel like it's to kind of get back to like what would get people either coming back or trying the game for the first time, stuff like that. Like, it's never a bad thing to have more fresh sets of eyes on a problem. You know what I mean? Like, anytime you run out of like ideas for how to do something, bringing in a fresh set of eyes and somebody totally separated from the entire thing is almost always good because it's just a different perspective. Like, having new people who have never played WoW before coming in to try SOD is a good thing for the game, especially if they come at it from a totally different game that they were playing before. And having that perspective and opinion about how SOD is can be pretty eye-opening for people who have just been playing WoW for a long time. We've just accepted certain things as just part of the game without ever really asking ourselves, well, why is it that way? Does it need to be that way? Like, that sort of stuff. It can be really helpful for the developers to figure out like a good way forward, especially for something like Classic Plus. Because if they were going to do Classic Plus, if it's going to be a standalone thing, a separate product, in a similar way to how like old school RuneScape is a separate product from the rest of RuneScape, like, they want to do everything they can to make sure that it's going to be successful and it'll stay successful going forward. So I think the more sets of eyes, the more fresh perspectives they can get on it and giving feedback towards all of these things, it can only make the game better.
Yep.
I think that long term it would play out significantly. Like I said, I think Classic Plus has such a high ceiling that I think neither of us could comprehend how high it could potentially be.
I think it's important to get to have like raise the floor as much as we can in the meantime, because like the potential that it has is crazy, but it's harder to reach that ceiling no matter how high the ceiling is. Like, it's easier to reach that ceiling if the floor is higher. So the more people we get giving feedback and giving different ideas and giving their takes on stuff, the more of that happens, that just raises the floor and makes it easier to reach that ceiling.
And that's the whole point of this show, is to bring on different opinions and bring on, get people out of their echo chambers and
bubbles.
Yeah.
Like, I see a lot of people in their bubbles, but this is an MMO, just to remind you guys.
Yeah. That's one thing I want to keep pure. I want you to have to group to do the coolest stuff. I do want you to have to do that, but in things where like runes and there's nobody to group with anymore for those types of runes, it's played its course. Those types of things should be a time gated thing, and that's why I think like new characters should have all the phase 3 runes. I know you didn't get it. It's fine. Like
Zanks, you're talking about the Thousand Needles thing, and then there's like the Frozen Makara thing, and then there's like the Warrior rune where you have to go to the area in Red Ridge and get the thing on the wall, and you got to go into SFK and get the thing behind Springvale, and like that type of stuff. That can be tough to get, and like you either have like, it's a lot harder to find a group to do that. These, like, right now, today, it's probably easier to pay somebody to run you through the shit instead of like running it organically, like how people were doing in phase 1 and 2.
Yep. And like, as long as like, just keep things relevant and, for the group content type of stuff, it's the same reason, they've changed the incursions now to just be soloable besides the bosses. Right. And like, that's just kind of like, that's just like,
I have to say the incursion change was really good. Re-leveling up. It was nice to go over and do a daily of incursions for a level. and then peace out and go do something else. That was
Yeah.
things that should have happened in phase 3, but that's just how it played out.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that's going to bring us to an end, guys. I'm going to start closing this out unless you have anything you want to say before I start doing that.
I'm all set for now. I'd probably have like an extra 2 hours worth of content I could probably talk about.
Yeah.
But like, I think I've got to think more on that entirely.
Yeah, we could do tangents off of tangents for days, but
Yep.
let's
We'll
not
have you
inflict
back
that
on.
on the audience here.
Yep.
Right.
We'll have you back on. But until then, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at WC Reloaded. You can follow the Masters Buttons Network at the Mash Network. If you want to send us an email, it's wcrpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to join the Discord, join the Patreon, know any of our links, just go to warcraftreloaded.com. How can you help us? You can help us by telling people about the podcast. We're like, the YouTube's doing pretty good. Like we are over 1,000 subscribers now. It's a good 1/10 of our audience, and you guys are an important piece now. So you guys can help us with comments, likes, shares, everything. Post us on Reddit. I say it all the time when you're at Walmart, be like, Warcraft Reloaded for life. Just like tell people about the podcast. That's the best way to help us. And where can we find you, Table Slam?
You can find me here on Twitch at table_slam or on YouTube at just Table Slam. Put out a couple videos recently after like several months of nothing. So check that out.
All right. And Zanks, is there anywhere people can find you?
Find me in game on Zenruki, which is the character I play. And a lot of my characters' names Zanks, but honestly, I do have a YouTube channel, very old. It has a bunch of like really old content when I was a kid, just like really got awful compared to like my criticism. But like I make WoW videos, but I also do other stuff with other games, or I do mixes of songs. Like I do spin occasionally. I do like a variety of content. I just don't do exactly primary WoW, but I would like to do something with SOD moving forward in the future.
Okay. And you can find me on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB. You can find me and the show live at twitch.tv/BlazinBob, no underscore. And with that being said, we're out, guys.
All right.
See you next week.
Take care.
Thank you very much for checking out Warcraft Reloaded podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content.